Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sherri Dally. Sherri Dally grew up in Ventura, California, in a loving and supportive family, known for her friendly attitude and positive outlook. She quickly became one of the most popular girls in school. In her senior year, she began dating Michael Dally, who was admired by many. Their relationship developed quickly, and the couple even decided to get married after graduation. Despite their many positive qualities, Michael was outgoing and sociable, while Sherri was an introverted and reserved young woman who displayed a calm demeanor. In contrast to her boyfriend's lively personality, Michael's personality did not fit in with Sherri's family. However, despite their obvious differences, the couple found a harmonious balance in their relationship. Sherri became more outgoing in social situations, while Michael adopted a calmer approach. Initially, their relationship faced significant opposition from their families, but Sherri was determined to pursue it, and her parents eventually relented. Their doubts were dispelled. When Sherri and Michael introduced each other to their families, Michael gradually won over Sherri's relatives. And seeing Sherri's joy reassured her parents of his good intentions, he showed his charm and made a positive impression. Appearing both intelligent and trustworthy, Michael's serious demeanor charmed Sherri, and her family supported her choice. After graduating from high school, the young couple started their lives together, both working at a local grocery store. However, for Sherri, this was not her ultimate aspiration. She dreamed of saving enough money to open a daycare at home, a goal that aligned with her interest in children. The couple married in 1982 when Sherri was 21, and by the age of 24, she had welcomed 2 sons. Just a year apart, motherhood brought her joy, and her daily routine revolved around taking her sons to school and daycare. Sherri not only took her sons to school, but also cared for several children in the neighborhood, further expanding her nurturing role. Gradually, she was able to quit her grocery store job and devote herself to childcare full-time. This allowed her to fulfill one of her long-cherished dreams of caring for children in her own home. To accommodate her growing responsibilities, she purchased a van, affectionately known to her friends as the local school bus. It seemed like the family had everything they could wish for, and there were no signs of challenges to come. On May 6, 1996, Sherri was scheduled, as usual, to pick up the students and take them home. When her husband returned home, he began receiving calls from worried parents inquiring about Sherri's absence. They were confused, as she had not arrived to pick up the children after school. Michael soon received a call from the school, confirming that his 2 sons had not been picked up either. Prompted by the situation, Michael went to the school, where he learned that Sherri had only been there that morning. Concerned for her safety, he suspected that she might have been in an accident or had encountered some kind of emergency. He began contacting local hospitals, but there were no reports of injuries matching her description. Feeling the urgency of the situation, he then contacted Sherri's parents, who lived about 120 kilometers away. They also had no idea where she was. Therefore, they decided to notify the police and report Sherri missing. The officers went to the couple's home to conduct a routine investigation and quickly realized that something was wrong. They decided to interview the neighbors, but no one had seen Sherri since she had dropped her children off at school that morning. Sherri usually went to the store around 10 a.m. to do her shopping and then returned home to do her chores. However, on May 6th, this routine was interrupted. She did not return by noon. Concerns prompted them to check the route Sherri would typically take, which led the police to the parking lot where she usually parked. There, they discovered her truck, apparently abandoned in a hurry. With the keys still in the ignition, Sherri's identification was found attached to her keychain, and the Mother's Day gifts she had purchased were scattered across the floor of the car. The doors were unlocked, and there was no sign of Sherri inside. The police later attempted to contact Michael, but he was not home, which they found unusual given the circumstances. Sherri was missing. Yet Michael did not seem anxious to hear from her. Furthermore, they learned that Michael had begun selling items that belonged to Sherri, suggesting that he was not expecting her to return. The police reviewed security footage from both the outdoor parking lot and inside the store. The recordings confirmed that Sherri had gone shopping that morning. Consistent with her usual routine, there was no indication that she was in distress. She was not followed around the store, and no suspicious individuals were seen in the footage. It was evident that something went wrong after she loaded her groceries into her truck. Unfortunately, security cameras did not capture any footage of the parking lot after she approached her car at 9:22 a.m. as the officers discussed the events in the parking lot. A passerby overheard their conversation and approached them. She reported that she had seen a turquoise sedan pull up near Sherri's car earlier that morning. A blonde woman, wearing a brown suit and sunglasses, exited the vehicle after a brief conversation with this woman. The witness saw Sherri being handcuffed and taken away in an unknown direction. The woman who arrested her did not appear to be a police officer, and the vehicle's appearance was unusual. It is difficult to determine the circumstances of her encounter with an apparent plainclothes officer. Police quickly became concerned, noting that it was unusual for police to operate in the city without a marked vehicle or uniform while making an arrest. The entire situation raised alarm bells. One officer, who happened to have attended high school with Sherri, stated that he knew both Sherri and her husband Michael well, and asserted that Sherri did not seem like the type of person who would be so serious as to be handcuffed and taken away, especially since the young couple had no prior legal issues. The witness provided a valuable clue. The police quickly searched the databases of all police stations, hoping to find relevant information regarding Sherri's case. However, they found no such records, indicating that this was not an arrest but a kidnapping. The police initially focused their attention on Michael, but then he provided a credible alibi at the time of the kidnapping. He was working at a grocery store, and several employees confirmed that he was on duty. In addition, security footage was reviewed to further verify his whereabouts. During the initial stages of the interrogation, Michael revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Diana. Surprisingly, he mentioned that he did not know her last name. Michael also did not know her address, but the police were able to obtain a phone number associated with Diana at that time, when cell phones were not yet common. Michael provided his home phone number as a result. He was released after investigating the address associated with the phone number. The police discovered that Diana's full name was Diana Hahn. The address was verified in their database, prompting the police to plan a visit to her home. The police arrived at the house and knocked on the door, although they heard noises from inside. No one answered at first. After a while of waiting, Michael opened the door. Standing behind him was Diana. Michael's attitude aroused suspicion. He appeared indifferent to his wife's disappearance and seemed more concerned about his mistress. The police decided to take both of them to the station for questioning, as they suspected that the situation might be related to a love triangle. It is believed that Sherri may have discovered Michael's affair, which could have led to conflict, either between the couple or involving Diana. Diana had become an integral part of Michael's life. He brought his sons to her home on numerous occasions, allowing them to spend time together as a family. Witnesses stated that Sherri had known about the situation long before her disappearance and had frequent conflicts with both Michael and Diana. Many witnesses confirmed the hostility between Diana and Sherri. Despite this tension, Michael appeared indifferent, which exacerbated the rivalry between the two women. Sherri viewed Diana as a homewrecker and was determined to protect her marriage. She steadfastly refused to consider divorce, believing that their problems were merely a temporary crisis that would eventually resolve itself through discussions with Diana and Michael, as well as their relatives. It became clear that Sherri's family had been facing significant challenges for a long time. Observations of Michael's behavior indicated that he treated Sherri more like a servant than a partner. She would wake up at 2 a.m. to prepare meals for him, and even prepared hot water for him, ensuring he could enjoy a hot bath when he woke up. Sherri complied with many of his requests, but Michael constantly found reasons to criticize her. Sherri's family members knew that Michael was unhappy with Sherri's appearance after giving birth. She dedicated a lot of time and effort to getting back in shape, dieting, exercising, and experimenting with her hairstyles and makeup, all in an attempt to please him. Unfortunately, her efforts never seemed to be enough. As he often insulted her and blamed her, the family dynamic worsened when Michael was transferred to a store in Santa Barbara. His new work schedule, which included night shifts and daytime sleep, added to their stress. After a while, Michael was transferred back, where he met his lover, Diana. They discovered that they had a lot in common, leading to the rapid development of their romantic relationship. Both of their mothers were from Japan, and their fathers had served in the United States Army. Their colleagues knew about the relationship and generally had a negative view of Diana. Her mysterious nature and stern demeanor scared many people. In the months before Sherri's disappearance, Michael often told his wife about a friend named Alex. He said that Alex was struggling after a breakup and that he was being supportive, including visiting Alex overnight. However, the frequent calls to their home were not from Alex, but from Diana, who disguised her voice to sound like a man. It was clear that Michael made no effort to hide his relationship. In fact, he seemed to flaunt it, which easily hurt Sherri and made her worry about his feelings for her. A neighbor recalled that last Christmas, Sherri came to his house in tears. She was alone, knowing that Michael had taken their sons to spend the holidays with Diana, feeling betrayed. Sherri sought comfort from her neighbor. Despite her pain, she had not yet considered divorce. She still hoped to save their relationship and believed she could work things out. However, as her mother later recounted, Sherri had decided to leave Michael and take the children before she went missing. She had no intention of seeking child support, believing she could handle her challenges on her own. The interrogation of Michael and Diana ended with a crucial question. Where was Diana the day Sherri went missing? She claimed to have taken the day off work to go for a long bike ride outside the city. However, her alibi appeared to be weak, as there was no testimony or video evidence to corroborate her story. A call to the police station from a co-worker at Michael's grocery store raised further concerns. The co-worker noted that Diana was an hour late for her shift the day after Sherri went missing. During questioning, Diana had several scratches on her forehead, and her hair almost covered her face. When asked to push her hair aside, it became clear that she was hiding several scratches, which she claimed were from a bicycle accident. However, these looked more like fingernail scratches than the usual injuries from a fall. When the police asked to see her palms, elbows, and knees, areas that are often injured in bicycle accidents, Diana's skin showed no scratches, suggesting that her claim of having fallen off a bicycle was a lie. Despite these contradictions, she stuck to her story. Michael's behavior was equally disturbing. He showed no concern about his wife's disappearance. He did not participate in search efforts and did not attempt to join any groups. He explained that he needed to care for their children during this difficult time. However, this excuse did not seem sincere, especially when he tried to spend time with his mistress, Diana. While leaving the children with his parents, the police are working to gather evidence to charge the suspects. Previously, a witness mentioned that the undercover cop was driving a turquoise car, but she could not remember the license plate number. The police believe that the perpetrators were unlikely to have used their own vehicles and suspect that the car the perpetrator was driving was rented. Therefore, they decided to check local car rental companies. Their investigation revealed that a turquoise Nissan Altima had indeed been rented on the day of Sherri's incident. The police aimed to impound the car for inspection, but it was at a car wash, although the rental company did not require a thorough cleaning of the interior after each return. The Nissan was in worse condition than usual. Employees reported that the interior was in disarray. The back seat was stained, and the side mirrors were torn at the direction of management. The car was sent for cleaning after the car was returned. The police inspected the interior. Surprisingly, much of the evidence remained intact, despite the cleaning. When they lifted the rear carpet, they discovered a large stain underneath that looked like dried blood. Consequently, the decision was made to seize the car for forensic examination during the inspection. Bloodstains were found in the trunk and on the seats when they cut the upholstery. The foam material of the rear seats was soaked with evidence, and the bloodstains in the car were sent for analysis. The results later confirmed that the blood belonged to Sherri. Additionally, it was determined that Diana was the person who rented the car. Therefore, the police decided to interrogate Diana again. During this interview, Diana maintained her innocence, sticking to her previously fabricated story during the search. The police found a handbag belonging to Diana, which contained a remarkable photograph. This photo was a professional studio picture of Sherri's family, capturing a family gathering with their children. However, two important details stood out. Diana appeared in the photo next to Sherri. As the police unraveled the complexities of the family's relationships, they began to uncover Diana's many intrigues. In Diana's handbag, a piece of paper was found with Sherri's name and her bank account number. Further investigation revealed that Diana had studied and practiced witchcraft. Diana had confided to a colleague about her intention to sacrificial someone on Michael's birthday, which raised significant concerns. Michael's birthday was only a few days after Sherri's murder, making these developments even more suspicious. In this context, Diana expressed a desire to speak to Michael. In response, the police organized a discreet meeting. They agreed to let Michael into the interrogation room. Their conversation was being recorded, and they did not seem to know it. They spoke in a very relaxed manner. The police could clearly hear their discussion, which provided valuable insights into the case. Diana expressed her frustration with Michael, accusing him of putting her in a dangerous situation that could have led to her arrest. She repeatedly questioned him about why he had placed her in these circumstances. The couple was clearly looking for a way out of this complicated situation and was trying to find a means to avoid punishment. Michael then made vague statements and urged Diana to tell the truth to the police, stressing that she had nothing to worry about. They attempted to stage a misleading conversation to distract the police. They had no idea that important information had reached police. Michael was then escorted out of the interrogation room, and the discussion continued with Diana, who was pressed to explain her possession of a piece of paper with the bank account number. In her defense, Diana claimed that Sherri had abandoned the children and that the account was necessary to purchase necessities for them. However, her explanation lacked credibility. The police believed that Diana was lying. After investigations, they learned that Sherri was a good woman. Many of her acquaintances described her as a loving mother to her children, and there was no sign of her mistreating them. It was clear that she was trusted to look after the children of her neighbors and other households, which reinforced the belief that she would not abandon her own children. Despite this, Diana continued to try to portray Sherri in a negative light. The police realized that Diana was involved in Sherri's case, but they felt they did not have enough evidence to arrest her or file charges. Therefore, they allowed her to go home while the investigation continued. The case was widely reported in the media, raising concerns that journalists could play a key role in assisting criminal investigations or obstructing the pursuit of justice. Sherri's disappearance was a popular topic on all news platforms, including newspapers, radio, and television. Her photos were displayed prominently throughout the city, prompting widespread public discussion. The police received numerous calls with tips related to the case. However, many of them were unfounded. Despite this, they focused on identifying credible leads based on the evidence they had. The police decided to share information with the public about a possible connection to someone named Diana as soon as her photo was aired. Calls to the station increased significantly. One notable tip came from a woman working at a local wig shop who recalled that Diana had purchased a chestnut wig a few weeks earlier. Diana made it clear that she intended to look like a police officer to intimidate someone. Further investigation revealed that she had paid for the wig with a check made out to Sherri. Signed in distinctive blue ink, a salesperson from another store contacted the police to report that Diana had visited his establishment around the same time. During this visit, Diana purchased handcuffs and a police badge, which she paid for with a personal check. Additionally, a hardware store employee provided a third report, stating that approximately a week before Sherri was abducted, Diana had also visited the store and purchased an axe. She drew attention with her striking makeup, which was particularly bold and set her apart from the others. Although the guest wished to remain anonymous, she paid with a check in her own name, establishing a direct link to the potential crime. The police collected physical evidence and later discovered an axe at Diana's residence, which was sent for forensic testing. Surprisingly, tests found no trace of Diana's blood. Suggesting the axe was not used in the murder, the police determined that Diana had carefully planned Sherri's abduction the day before. She had purchased a brown suit, shoes, superglue, large garbage bags, toiletries, lighter fluid, matches, sunglasses, and other items that could have been instrumental in the abduction. As a result, the police were able to piece together a possible timeline of the events surrounding the abduction. Sherri may not have recognized Diana when she wore the wig and glasses, which could explain why she did not resist during the arrest. However, when they were close together and Sherri got into the rental car, it was clear that she recognized Diana sitting in the back seat. Sherri attempted to escape by screaming and doing her best to block Diana from driving away. During her resistance, Sherri scratched Diana's forehead based on the blood found in the car. It is possible that Sherri was killed shortly afterward in the back seat. Diana was eventually arrested, and it was discovered that she was in possession of a pen containing the same blue ink that was involved in the case. Attention then turned to Michael, as he seemed to have been aware of his mistress Diana's plans, given his suspicious behavior at a press conference. There were indications that he might have been the instigator of the crime. The police suggested that Sherri's husband, Michael, be investigated for possible involvement in the murder. Following this revelation, the police department received numerous calls from drug dealers and people in the escort service industry, all reporting that Michael regularly used drugs and hired escorts. One escort revealed that on the day Sherri went missing, she had met Michael, who had taken her out of town. This information attracted the attention of the police as the investigation progressed. On June 1, 1996, near Kaduna Larga Road, on the edge of a cliff, police discovered women's shoes and sunglasses belonging to Diana. Shortly thereafter, they found the body of a woman. Dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sherri, who had gone missing. Forensic examinations revealed that Sherri had been stabbed about a dozen times, mostly in the neck and upper chest. A forensic expert determined that a serrated knife was the murder weapon, with multiple stab wounds to Sherri's body indicating a violent and deliberate attack. particularly to the face. This evidence suggested a personal grudge against Sherri after the murder. Sherri's body was dumped outside the city. Worryingly, Michael had been socializing with an escort just meters from where Sherri's body was found. Suggesting his possible involvement in the crime, the police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael. Further investigations revealed that Diana had lured Sherri into her car before killing her. Notably, hair from Diana's wig was found on Sherri, and the wig was later recovered. Diana's trial was initially held. With her facing charges of kidnapping and murder, the attorney took a fairly passive approach to defending his client, focusing primarily on minimizing the severity of the sentence by arguing that the murder was not intentional. However, the evidence presented clearly demonstrated that Diana had meticulously planned the attack. After brief deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Diana Hahn was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Diana testified against Michael, claiming that he had urged her to kill Sherri. However, Diana's testimony was not the most crucial factor in the prosecution's success. Just before the hearing began, another woman came forward to the police, revealing that she had been in a relationship with Michael shortly before the murder. She stated that he had also urged her to kill his wife, Sherri. According to her account, Michael not only sought to kill his wife, but also requested that it be done in the cruelest way possible. Wishing for Sherri to suffer for a long time before dying, this woman considered his request a joke and refused to comply. The woman then decided to end her relationship with Michael, who was behaving in a troubled manner. After discovering the tragic events that had occurred, she contacted the police. The prosecution presented evidence that Michael's motive for the murder was a desire to avoid a prolonged divorce and custody battle, as well as to secure the financial benefit of Sherri's life insurance policy, from which he had received $50. Meanwhile, Michael's attorney presented a defense, largely arguing that Michael was a victim of circumstances due to Sherri's refusal to file for divorce. Ultimately, Michael Dally was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After Sherri's death, custody of her children was awarded to their grandparents.
On the evening of May 28, 2023, 29-year-old Julia Tramontano vanished without a trace. 7 months pregnant, she stopped responding to calls and messages from loved ones. The first person to report her disappearance was the man she lived with, Alexander Impagnatiello. He insisted that when he returned home from work, he found the apartment empty and had no idea where his partner could have gone. From the very beginning, there were too many unusual details in this case. Julia had left behind most of her personal belongings, and her plans for the near future gave no indication that she intended to disappear. As investigators began piecing together her last known activities, they uncovered even more troubling facts. The night before she went missing, Julia had sent messages to her mother, Loredana Femiano, and a close friend, revealing that she had had a serious argument with Alexander. She was deeply upset and wrote that the situation was causing her a great deal of distress. But the most important question remained unanswered: what really happened that fateful evening? If Julia had truly left the house on her own, why had no one seen her since? In the days that followed, investigators would begin unraveling a web of deception that would lead to a grim truth. Julia was born on May 2, 1994, in a small town in the province of Naples. She grew up in a close-knit family where support and warmth were always present. Her parents encouraged independence and self-confidence from an early age. While they embraced modern views, family traditions remained a cornerstone of their lives, and home was always a place she could return to for guidance, comfort. Julia attended a local school, excelling in the humanities. She was drawn to real estate, fascinated by architecture, investment opportunities, and the idea of becoming a successful real estate agent. After high school, she pursued a degree in the field, quickly mastering the profession thanks to her analytical mindset and strong communication skills. By the age of 25, she had built a solid reputation in the industry, but for Julia, this wasn't enough. She dreamed of life in a big city filled with opportunities. By the time she turned 26, her career in her hometown had reached a plateau. Working at a real estate agency, she realized the local market had its limitations. Inspired by her friends' stories, she decided to move to Senegal, a suburb of Milan, where she believed would offer her a new chapter filled with potential. By the end of 2018, her decision was final. Senegal symbolized independence, new connections, and the career growth she longed for. The transition happened quickly. Packing her belongings and saying goodbye to her loved ones, she set off for the city that she hoped would become her new home. After moving to Senegal, Julia immediately immersed herself in work. The city's real estate market was fast-paced, competitive, required confidence and persistence. She adapted quickly, building connections, attending networking events, and closing deals. Her new life was exciting, but amid her busy schedule, she found herself longing for something more, personal happiness. It was during this time that she met Alexander. Their paths crossed at a Milan bar where her colleagues had invited her to celebrate a successful deal. Alexander worked as a bartender at a high-end lounge inside a five-star hotel. A year older than Julia, he was charming, outgoing, and had a natural ability to connect with people. His confidence and charisma drew her in. With him, she felt like she could relax, momentarily escape the pressures of work, and simply enjoy the present. The first few weeks of their relationship felt effortless. They spent evenings dining at restaurants, strolling through the city at night, and talking about the future. Alexander shared that he had a son from a previous relationship but assured her that his past was behind him and that he was now looking for stability. Julia sincerely hoped that her move to Senegal would bring not only career growth but also personal fulfillment. She was convinced that Alexander was the person she was meant to build a future with. Julia believed she had finally met someone with whom she could build a lasting relationship. Their romance moved quickly, and within a few months, they decided to move in together. She had no idea what secrets he was hiding or how much her decision would change the course of her life. Tensions in Julia's relationship with Alexander were growing. She felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't pinpoint the issue. As time went on, the discomfort increased, while Alexander continued to act as if everything was normal. By the end of 2022, Julia noticed changes in her body, constant fatigue, strange cravings, and a missed period led her to suspect that something was different. Not wanting to wait any longer, she bought a pregnancy test. She then realized she was pregnant. This news brought mixed feelings. She had always wanted a family, but the past few months with Alexander had been challenging. Nonetheless, she knew she needed to tell him in person. Nervously, Julia chose the right moment to share the news. She had thought about various possible reactions: surprise, joy, maybe even fear, but Alexander's expression was unreadable. After a few seconds of silence, he finally asked one question: "Are you sure?" Julia felt a chilling distance in his demeanor. He showed no curiosity and asked no questions about how far along she was or how she was feeling. His indifference was impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, he never brought up the topic again. No discussions about the future, no interest in upcoming doctor's visits. Julia felt abandoned but held on to hope that in time he would come to terms with the situation. The new year began, but Alexander's attitude remained unchanged. More and more, Julia found herself spending evenings alone, contemplating her future. She kept working, trying to focus on other things, but an uneasy feeling grew inside her. Meanwhile, Alexander's double life took an unexpected turn. In early 2023, he learned that his other partner, Allegra Syria, was also expecting. The news caught him completely off guard. Just like Julia, Allegra had no idea that another woman was in her life. She truly believed she and Alexander were in a committed relationship. Unlike Julia, however, Allegra was unsure whether she wanted to continue the pregnancy. Alexander convinced Allegra that having a child wasn't the right decision at that moment. He assured her that he would support whatever choice she made, but strongly implied that ending the pregnancy would be for the best. Allegra hesitated for a long time but eventually agreed. Alexander accompanied her to the medical procedure, ensuring that this chapter was closed. He hoped that with Allegra's pregnancy no longer an issue, he could now focus on dealing with what he saw as his bigger problem, Julia's decision to have the baby. Unlike Allegra, Julia was determined to continue her pregnancy. Despite his emotional distance, Alexander repeatedly tried to persuade her to reconsider, but Julia refused to change her mind. For her, this was a conscious and personal decision. She knew that her relationship with Alexander was falling apart, but she was prepared to raise the baby on her own. What she didn't realize was that this choice would become a turning point in her life. After Julia refused to terminate the pregnancy, Alexander realized he was losing control of the situation. Her firm decision disrupted his plans and forced him to look for another way to free himself from what he saw as a problem. He had begun systematically researching poisons. He scoured the internet for methods to cause harm without raising suspicion, analyzing which substances were both effective and difficult to detect. His research covered chemical compounds found in household products, plant-based toxins, and even highly dangerous substances like cyanide. However, most of the options he found were either too difficult to obtain or left clear traces in the body. Eventually, he settled on rodenticides, products designed to eliminate rodents. These were widely available over the counter and wouldn't raise any red flags. He also found information suggesting that certain types worked slowly, causing internal bleeding, weakness, and anemia symptoms that could easily be mistaken for pregnancy complications. After, Alexander began putting his plan into action. He started adding small amounts of the toxic substance to Julia's food and drinks, hoping that her health would gradually decline. Within weeks, she began experiencing unusual symptoms: constant exhaustion, dizziness, nausea, and sharp abdominal pain. Julia confided in her friends about how unwell she felt but assumed it was just part of the pregnancy. She had no idea that something much more sinister was happening. Alexander closely monitored her condition, expecting the effects to intensify, but the poison wasn't working as quickly as he had hoped. Frustrated, he continued to try increasing its dosage, but the results were still disappointing. Julia still felt sick, but her body was fighting back, and the pregnancy was progressing. This infuriated Alexander. His original plan had failed, and now he was forced to consider another way out. Alexander was accustomed to being in control of situations. He skillfully crafted his lies, knowing exactly what to say to persuade each woman to accept his version of reality. Julia thought he was merely going through a tough time and believed he would eventually come to terms with the pregnancy. Allegra, meanwhile, was convinced that his past relationship had ended long ago. But one misstep shattered his carefully maintained facade. The first sign of trouble for Allegra was how uncomfortable Alexander became whenever his past was mentioned. He avoided talking about his life before they met, never shared his social media accounts, and didn't mention his ex. Initially, this didn't seem suspicious, but over time, the inconsistencies began to accumulate. The turning point occurred when she accidentally discovered recent photos on his phone, images of him with Julia. Their expressions and body language indicated that their relationship was still very much alive. Allegra didn't want to leap to conclusions, so she started observing him more closely and taking mental notes. He frequently left in the evenings, saying he was working late, but his co-workers at the hotel disclosed that he had actually clocked out early. At times, he wouldn't answer his phone, only to later offer excuses that didn't quite make sense. When Allegra confronted Alexander about the photos, he responded immediately. He accused Julia of being unable to accept their breakup and spreading the pictures to make him feel guilty. Allegra wanted to trust his explanation, but it felt off to her. As she asked more questions, Alexander's answers became less convincing. Realizing he was losing control, he quickly changed his story. He claimed that Julia not only refused to move on but had also faked her pregnancy to try to keep him. In a last-ditch effort to support his lie, Alexander even created a fake DNA test. He modified a file he found online and presented it as evidence that he was not the child's father. Although Allegra initially believed him, her doubts persisted. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she knew. A few days later, Allegra decided to investigate for herself. While Alexander was sleeping, she took his phone, found Julia's number, and sent her a message. Julia replied almost immediately, and her tone wasn't one of revenge. Rather, she was also seeking answers. The next day, Allegra proposed they meet in person. Both women realized that this conversation had the potential to change everything. On May 27, 2023, they agreed to meet at Armani Hotel where Allegra worked, feeling a mix of tension and determination. Allegra was still unaware of the full extent of Alexander's betrayal, while Julia was shocked to learn that the man she had envisioned a future with was living a double life. Their meeting began cautiously. Allegra spoke first, revealing what she had uncovered. She explained how Alexander had convinced her that his past relationship was completely over, and she mentioned the supposed DNA test that indicated the baby wasn't his. Julia listened intently. Once Allegra finished, Julia calmly clarified that the test was fake. She had never asked for a test, and the timeline of her pregnancy corresponded perfectly with their relationship. More importantly, she disclosed that she and Alexander were still living together, and he had never given her any indication that their relationship was ending. As the minutes passed, Allegra began to see the reality of the situation. She realized she had been deceived from the beginning. Her entire view of their relationship changed, and for the first time, she felt certain about the truth. Although she was hurt and disappointed, she held no resentment toward Julia. It became painfully clear that both women had fallen victim to the same web of lies. Their conversation lasted more than an hour as them shared details, gradually uncovering the full extent of Alexander's deceit. Eventually, they moved from seeing each other as rivals to feeling connected. In that moment, Julia made a decisive choice. She was finished with Alexander. Her future was for herself and her child. Alexander had no role in it now. Upon returning home, Julia confronted Alexander right away, revealing that she knew everything and that their relationship was over. He initially denied everything and then became defensive, accusing her of intruding into his private matters. However, Julia disregarded his excuses, firmly stated that she was leaving for Naples and didn't want any further contact with him. That evening, she texted her mother and sister to explain her decision. They fully supported her and offered assistance in any way they could. Julia reassured them, saying she needed to handle a few things in Milan first but would be home in a few days. After their conversation, Alexander realized he had lost control. Everything he had concealed was now revealed. Julia knew the truth about his double life, his lies, and his manipulation. She no longer trusted him or listened to his words. She had made a firm decision to leave him. That day, the tension between them reached. Julia ignored all of Alexander's attempts to engage her. She focused solely on packing her belongings, showing no emotion. Her silence only intensified his frustration. Alexander pleaded with her, insisting she was making a mistake, declaring his love, and urging her to reconsider, but Julia remained silent. His anger escalated as he raised his voice in desperation, seeking any reaction from her. When he realized she had made up her mind, a wave of uncontrollable rage consumed him. In a moment of blind fury, he grabbed a knife from the counter and attacked. Julia had no opportunity to defend herself. The assault was swift and precise. But for Alexander, it was not enough to stop there. Driven by panic and fear of being exposed, he continued his assault, losing all sense of restraint. Realizing he needed to eliminate the evidence, he dragged her to the bathroom. He poured alcohol over her and set her on fire, hoping the flames would destroy any evidence. However, the fire only caused burns and did not fully consume. Frantically, he grabbed rags, cleaning supplies, scrubbing the blood from the floor, walls, and furniture. Despite his efforts, the stains persisted. The apartment still resembled a crime scene. He understood that he couldn't completely erase what had happened, but he believed he could find a way to avoid being held responsible. Having failed to destroy the evidence through fire, he needed a new strategy. His first step was to stage her disappearance, making it seem like Julia had left on her own. He took her phone, began messaging her family and friends. Knowing they would be concerned if she suddenly went missing, he crafted messages to imply she had chosen to leave. He sent a brief, vague text to her mother, stating that she needed some time alone. Then, he messaged one of her friends, claiming that she had left but wasn't ready to discuss her whereabouts. He intended to buy himself some time to make it appear that Julia had simply vanished. However, his plan didn't stop there. He was aware that someone would eventually alert the authorities, so, on May 28, 2023, he went to the police and reported Julia missing. He claimed that they had an argument and she left the house, never to return. His story was straightforward. That morning he had gone to work, and when he came back, she was gone. He's saying that her personal belongings, including her passport and money, were missing, implying she had left town voluntarily. Investigators paid close attention, but right from the beginning, something felt off. His behavior raised suspicion. He spoke too confidently, almost as if he already knew what questions the officers would ask. In contrast to Julia's family and friends, who were frantic, desperate for information, he remained unsettlingly calm. While the police organized a search, Alexander concentrated on concealing the evidence. He wrapped the body in a plastic bag and moved them to the garage. Over the next few days, he relocated the body several times, first hiding them in the basement of their building, then bringing them back to the garage. He was trying to find a way to get rid of them for good, but the longer he waited, the more mistakes he made. Investigators started examining his statements closely, interviewing neighbors, and searching for inconsistencies. He thought he was still in control, but law enforcement was closing in. After Alexander reported Julia missing, the police followed their standard procedures for such cases. The first significant clue came when forensic specialists found traces of blood in his car. Despite his attempts to clean it, modern technology allowed investigators to identify the biological evidence, which was confirmed to belong to Julia. The second piece of evidence was uncovered in the common areas of their apartment building. Faint reddish stains on the stairs and in the hallway initially appeared to be dust or spilled liquid. However, chemical testing revealed they were traces of partially cleaned blood. Investigators noted Alexander's strange behavior. Unlike most people whose loved ones disappear, he showed little genuine concern. He did not reach out to Julia's family for help in finding her, nor did he actively participate in spreading information about her disappearance. He only completed the formal steps to report her missing, which raised further suspicions. A major breakthrough in the case occurred when detectives analyzed his electronic devices. They confiscated his phone, computer, and tablet, revealing alarming findings. First, they discovered a search history that dated back several months before the crime. He had been researching poisons, learning about the effects of various toxins, and reading articles on how to discreetly harm someone. Some searches even questioned why certain toxic substances might fail to work. Another crucial piece of evidence was the forged DNA test he had shown Algra. Forensic analysis confirmed that the document had been tampered with and that it was downloaded from a website that allowed users to edit medical records. As more evidence accumulated, Alexander's story began to unravel. Investigators increased their pressure, systematically highlighting inconsistencies in his account. Initially, he maintained his innocence, claiming he knew nothing about it. However, with each interrogation, the police presented undeniable facts. They showed him photographs of blood stains, confronted him with his search history. They brought in witnesses who reported hearing loud noises and shouting from Alexander's apartment. A significant breakthrough in the investigation happened when authorities examined Alexander's actions after Julia went missing. Surveillance cameras showed him making several trips to the garage, where he carried plastic bags inside and later came out empty-handed. Eventually, he confessed and revealed where he had hidden her body. On June 1, 2023, police found Julia's remains in a dense area near Sago. Forensic examination indicated that someone had tried to burn the body, but the attempt was not completed. Despite his efforts to conceal the truth, experts were able to determine how she died and gather conclusive evidence linking him to the crime. The tragic death of Giulia Tramontano shocked people all over Italy, a country where gender-based violence is a serious issue. After Alexander was arrested, protests began nationwide. Women filled the streets, carrying signs and demanding stricter punishments for domestic violence. Memorial marches took place in cities like Milan, Naples, and Rome, calling for systemic changes to better protect vulnerable individuals. At one rally, Giulia's sister, Chiara Tramontano, urged lawmakers to take action against the increasing number of cases where offenders face no significant consequences until it is too late. Forensic experts and investigators focused on understanding the psychological profile of Alexander. A psychological evaluation revealed troubling behavioral traits. Court-appointed psychiatrists determined that he exhibited strong narcissistic tendencies, showing no remorse for his actions. His behavior during interrogations and court appearances demonstrated a profound self-centeredness, an utter lack of empathy. He viewed others only in terms of how they could serve his interests, ignoring their feelings. His actions were motivated solely by a need to protect his reputation and keep control over those around him. Any perceived loss of power triggered a quick and dangerous reaction. During the trial, Alexander tried to appear remorseful, but neither Giulia's family nor the public found his words convincing. He claimed to be baffled about how he could commit such a horrific act, asserting it was a moment of impulsive rage that he didn't fully recognize. However, prosecutors presented compelling evidence: his online searches for poisons, the attempted poisoning, the falsified DNA test, and the false report he filed with the police. Each piece of evidence demonstrated that the crime was premeditated. After Alexander's arrest, Algra decided to help the authorities. She provided them with her messages with him, revealing that he had lied to both her and Giulia. During the trial, Algra also testified about the fake DNA test and his many attempts to manipulate her. As a witness, she was called by prosecutors to confirm important details, including how Alexander concealed his double life, lied about Giulia's pregnancy, and made excuses when the truth began to emerge. She realized that if she hadn't stumbled upon those photos on his phone, the truth could have remained hidden for much longer. During her testimony, she expressed the guilt she felt toward Giulia, even though she too had been a victim of his lies. After the trial, Algra chose not to speak to journalists, stayed out of the public eye, and tried to create some distance from the tragedy. Reports suggest that she later left Milan for another city, hoping to rebuild her life. The court found Alexander Impagnatil guilty of first-degree murder, highlighting aggravating factors such as the cruelty of the crime, the ongoing emotional abuse inflicted on the victim, and his intentional efforts to destroy evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison. In the judge's closing remarks, it was stated that such crimes cannot be justified as mere lapses in control or temporary emotional turmoil. Alexander's actions over several months showed a clear and deliberate intention to eliminate Giulia. Giulia's case serves as a tragic reminder of the risks posed by individuals who view their partners as possessions. It raised awareness and contributed to a larger movement aimed at protecting those who are still in danger. Giulia Tramontano's radiant spirit, marked by her ambition, warmth, and unwavering resolve, continues to resonate far beyond the tragedy that claimed her life. Her courage in the face of betrayal and her dreams for her unborn child remain a powerful testament to the strength of the human heart. Through the tireless advocacy of her mother, Loredana Femiano, and sister, Chiara Tramontano, Giulia's legacy fuels a growing movement to combat gender-based violence, inspiring communities to stand united for justice and protection. In every heart she touched, Giulia's light shines on, a beacon of hope and a call to build a world where no one suffers in silence. Many people do not recognize that the person in front of them is actually dangerous rather than loving. Unfortunately, not everyone has the opportunity to correct their mistakes. History tends to repeat itself, including its darkest moments. In today's story, we will discuss a significant betrayal that led to one of the most brutal and senseless crimes in Alaska's history, driven by greed and foolishness. This tragic event took place in Anchorage, Alaska. Interestingly, although the overall crime rate in the U.S. has been declining, Anchorage is an exception, with violent crime rates being 60% higher than the national average. Statistics show that even women in this area commit violent crimes more frequently, usually targeting their loved ones. Cynthia Hoffman spent her entire life in Anchorage. Family and friends described her as a bright and kind girl working hard to achieve her American dream. She faced challenges due to a developmental delay, which made her school experience difficult. Nevertheless, Cynthia never gave up, consistently aimed for greater achievements. She graduated from high school, completed driving school, and secured a job at a diner. She cherished her friendships, particularly with her best friend Denali Bremer. The two had been friends since elementary school and had plans to go to college together. Although she aspired to attend college, those dreams were ultimately unfulfilled. Cynthia's parents were divorced, but she had good relationships with both her father, Timothy Hoffman, and her mother, who both supported her endeavors. On June 2, 2019, 19-year-old Cynthia missed a scheduled meeting with her father. Timothy, a construction worker, often brought Cynthia along on part-time jobs, where she helped him with minor tasks. In return, he paid her, teaching her the importance of hard work and saving money from a young age. Cynthia had assisted her father frequently for over a year, and they saw each other daily. On that particular day, she was expected to meet him after school. Her father had promised to pay her for past work when he was short on cash, so she was excited to go because it meant she would get paid double. She also mentioned that she needed money for a party that weekend. Cynthia texted her father to let him know she was at the park for a meeting and promised to return in about an hour. Timothy waited for her, but she never came back. He tried calling her phone and sending her messages, but she didn't respond. He thought it was possible she was just out with friends and lost track of time, so he hesitated to call the police. However, none of his messages were read, and his calls went unanswered throughout the day. Concerned about his daughter and her unexplained absence, he decided to contact the authorities. When Timothy arrived at the police station, he reported Cynthia as missing. The police took the case seriously and quickly began their investigation. They organized search teams, brought in volunteers. Timothy joined the search right away, driving around the city and asking people if they had seen his daughter. He showed them her photo, but despite his efforts all day, he couldn't find any useful information. From the beginning, he had a nagging feeling that something was wrong. Cynthia's behavior was unusual. She had never been gone for this long before, and she didn't have any mental health issues or a tendency to run away. She was naive, needed guidance. There had been no family conflicts or signs that she wanted to leave. In the days that followed, Timothy began to lose hope for a positive outcome. He started to fear that someone had lured his daughter to the park with harmful intentions, despite the ongoing search. The police initially thought Timothy might have more information, but he had a verified alibi during this time. Timothy stayed in touch with Cynthia's friends, particularly her best friend Denali, who had been in regular contact with Cynthia and was one of the last to see her. Denali expressed that she had no knowledge of Cynthia's whereabouts and hoped for her safe return. She requested updates if Timothy discovered any new information. Meanwhile, some school friends reported that they last saw Cynthia and Denali leaving together in a car, heading off in an unknown direction. This raised suspicions, as lying seemed unnecessary unless someone had something to conceal. When investigators looked into Cynthia's social media, they found that a person named Tyler had invited her for a ride, which she had accepted. This invitation coincided with the timing of her disappearance. With no new leads, detectives began tracking Cynthia's contacts leading up to her missing status. Who is Tyler? What was Cynthia doing, and where was she headed? Her classmates confirmed that she had planned to meet her father to help him with work and collect her payment. After the police spoke with Denali, she changed her story about Timothy. She admitted that after classes, she and Cynthia were walking to their cars when she dropped Cynthia off at the nearest city park. Following that, Cynthia sent her father a message updating him on her whereabouts and promised to see him later. However, after those messages, Cynthia's phone went silent. The search efforts then shifted from the city streets to the dense underbrush of the park. On June 4, 2019, just 2 days after her missing, Cynthia Hoffman was discovered dead. The 19-year-old's body was found on the banks of the Eklutna River, a popular tourist spot. Her hands were tied behind her back, and her mouth was taped shut. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, inflicted from behind. Sadly, the concerns of her loving father were realized. Around the same time, Denali's mother went to the police station to report that Denali and her friend might know where Cynthia had gone and could be connected to the case. According to Denali's mother, both Denali and her 16-year-old friend, Caden McIntosh, claimed to know what happened to Cynthia. They were both interrogated, with the police particularly focused on why Denali was using a different name. When they met Caden, he caught the officer's attention. The boy was visibly shaking and gave confused, evasive answers, leading them to believe he should be questioned first. Caden was extremely nervous and soon admitted to murdering Cynthia Hoffman. He claimed that his 18-year-old girlfriend, Denali, had planned the murder but could not explain why. Denali was uncooperative from the start, avoiding communication with investigators, refuting Caden's account, and presenting an alternate narrative. She stated that she, Caden, and Cynthia went to Thunderbird Falls after school for a photo shoot. They intended to create a unique scene that involved using tape and ropes to stage a kidnapping, with Cynthia's mouth taped and her hands bound. Denali admitted that she carried a gun for self-defense, and all participants in the plan were aware of this. She recounted that at one point, Caden took the gun, aimed it at Cynthia, and attacked her in the back of the head without any clear reason. Denali said she was shocked and confused afterward, unsure of how to respond. The group simply disposed of the body in the water and left, as Caden commanded her to do so in a threatening manner, which intimidated her into compliance. She felt it wasn't worth informing the police to avoid causing a panic, worried that she might become another victim. Additionally, she couldn't provide any information about a motive for the murder. There were no known conflicts among them, and no one had witnessed such cruelty before. As a result of the statements, Caden McIntosh was charged with murdering Cynthia Hoffman. Criminologists examined the crime scene, and forensic experts conducted an autopsy. This led to the collection of enough evidence to reconstruct the events of June 2nd. However, the stories told by the young people at the police station contained many inconsistencies, particularly regarding the motive, which remained unclear. The mystery was clarified when law enforcement accessed Denali's mobile phone. They discovered that she was not just a witness to the murder, but also involved in it. The situation became clearer after examining her messages. After Cynthia's death, Denali posted on social media, "Oh, look what we just did," directed at someone named Tyler. This message was shockingly cynical and cruel, revealing not a grieving best friend but rather a brutal killer who took pride in her actions. The police obtained a Snapchat video that served as crucial evidence of Denali's guilt. This prompted them to question her again, as there was enough evidence to charge both Caden and Denali in connection with the murder. Caden claimed he had been manipulated and that Denali had suggested the attack. She continued to deny any wrongdoing until she was asked about Tyler, who was saved in her phone as a babe. The police found that shortly before the tragedy, Denali met a man from Kansas on an app where he claimed to be a millionaire. They started off communicating and flirting, but eventually, he sent her a disturbing message. Tyler gradually got Denali to open up about her preferences, including her intimate desires. He revealed that he was willing to pay $9 million for photos and videos depicting abuse violence. Denali became intrigued, and over time, her friend on social media convinced her to kill. Cynthia was an easy target because she was Denali's best friend, very naive, and completely trusted her. This made it easy for Denali to lure her into a trap. Investigators identified the car used by the young killers during the murder. It belonged to a relative of Denali. They interviewed Denali's 19-year cousin, Caleb Leland, who was aware of the $9 million offer and supported Denali, thinking the money would solve their financial issues. Denali had asked to borrow his car to take the victim and her accomplice to the murder scene. In return, she promised him $500,000. After agreeing to help facilitate the murder of an innocent person, Caleb was fully aware of her intentions. He confirmed that Cynthia's murder was not a result of a desire for a photo shoot or an accident. It was a planned act of revenge for money. Denali had discussed her plans with her brothers, detailing where she intended to take her best friend and outlining the murder plan in great detail. Although Caleb didn't fully believe Denali was serious at first, he grasped the seriousness of the situation only after hearing about Cynthia's death. However, his disbelief was just a cover. He was trying to downplay his role in the tragedy to lessen his potential punishment. Between May and June 2019, police focused their investigation on 3 suspects: Denali Bremer, Caden McIntosh, and Caleb Leland. They were believed to have plotted a murder together. As detectives gathered more evidence, it became increasingly clear that these teenagers were guilty. Notably, all 3 were friends of the victim, yet they betrayed her without remorse. Tragically, they valued $9 million more than the life of their friend. Investigators also found that 2 other teenagers were aware of the crime. However, they were minors at the time of the attack and were not considered accomplices. They had simply overheard Denali confessing to the crime. Their failure to report this information was disappointing, as they could have helped prevent the tragedy by alerting the police. To protect the minors and their families, their names were kept confidential and did not come up in court. The planning for the massacre began 4 months before the murder. On June 2, 2019, the juvenile offenders launched their attack. Denali invited Cynthia to join her and Caden on a hike to a remote area near Thunderbird Falls deep in the park. The accomplices had meticulously prepared their plan, even practicing with an unloaded gun. Denali pretended to be a future victim and used her brother's car, which he had lent her for $500,000. Once they reached the riverbank, Caden and Cynthia temporarily left Denali behind and advanced ahead. Suddenly, Caden drew a gun and pointed it at Cynthia's head. Denali caught up, restrained Cynthia by tying her hands and taping her mouth shut. Cynthia quickly realized this was not a prank, but it was too late for her to escape or shout for help. Terrified, she was forced to kneel. Denali's brother filmed the entire incident. Caden then shot Cynthia in the back of the head with a 9mm pistol, killing her instantly. Denali and Caden disposed of her body in the river and tried to erase any evidence linking them to the crime. They burned some of Cynthia's belongings, including her purse and mobile phone. Afterward, Denali sent a message to Cynthia's father, Timothy, from Cynthia's phone, fabricating a story about a scheduled meeting with a new boyfriend. Detectives later found evidence that Denali attempted to delete data from her mobile phone. However, despite her efforts, many conversations with Tyler remained, in which she detailed the murder plan and shared photos and videos related to the crime. Even after the murder was committed, she unsuccessfully tried to erase the incriminating evidence. In reality, she stayed in contact with Tyler throughout the murder, providing him with detailed updates. Although Tyler lived hundreds of kilometers away, he was just as responsible for the crime as the individuals who carried it out. Law enforcement focused on identifying him to ensure he faced justice. It is important to note that Tyler sought not only murder but also abuse violence. However, forensic experts found no evidence of such acts on the victim's body. This raised alarming implications, suggesting that if incentives had been provided, Denali and her accomplices might have continued to commit similar crimes. Fortunately, they were identified and arrested immediately after the first murder, and they did not receive any compensation from Tyler. Specialists were called in to investigate and traced the phone number of the perpetrator. It was revealed that Tyler was not in Kansas, but in Indiana. The actual mastermind behind the brutal crime was Darren Schillmiller, who grew up in New Salisbury. He had been exchanging photos with Denali for a while, but he had not sent her any pictures of himself. At first, Tyler had pretended to be a wealthy millionaire who won the lottery, but in reality, the instigator of the crime was a 21-year-old who was far from being a millionaire. Friends and family described him as a reclusive and strange person who had faced bullying during school. Darren had endured a difficult upbringing with an alcoholic father and had minimal social interaction in school. His unusual clothing style often led to conflicts, and after graduation, he was frequently seen engaging in suspicious activities, like chasing cats that later vanished without a trace. However, there had been no previous reports of cruelty from him. After completing his studies, he found it difficult to determine his path in life and was unable to secure a full-time job. This situation took Denali by surprise, as she genuinely thought she would receive $9 million for her crime. Once Denali discovered Tyler's real identity, she chose to cooperate with the prosecution. She revealed that she had been in an online relationship with Tyler for several months, during which he used pictures of an unrelated person from the internet to deceive her. This manipulation led her to be misled by the future killer. Denali expressed her desire to resolve her problems, and those of her family, through money, having dealt with her friend. However, this was not the only troubling request from the millionaire's friend. According to her, he urged her to commit abuse violence against 2 children, intending to use a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old boy for this purpose. They were meant to suffer and die in pain, enduring torture, abuse. Fortunately, this horrific plan never came to fruition. When the police arrived at Darren's door, he was taken aback and promptly confessed to everything. He admitted to having been in contact with Denali for several months, realized that she was easily influenced and manipulated. Consequently, this quiet, deceitful man convinced himself that he could take someone's life through another person. Denali acknowledged that she remained influenced by Tyler, even after he refused to finance the initial massacre. They continued to have faith in him, waited for payment, and naively hoped for a better life ahead. Meanwhile, Tyler manipulated them, holding on to their trust while blackmailing them with incriminating evidence of the murder. He then demanded more killings and continued his threats. Fortunately, law enforcement apprehended the entire gang before further harm could be done. The prosecutor's office charged all those involved in the massacre with conspiracy and premeditated murder. The 2 youngest participants, whose identities were never revealed, were also accused of being complicit because they hid the murderers' identities. They never even informed her parents, despite having the chance to potentially save her. The crime that occurred in Alaska gained significant media attention, sparking public outrage. Journalists were eager for a sensational story, which created challenges for the victim's family. The relatives of the young offenders also faced severe repercussions, including numerous threats and genuine fears for their safety. Cynthia's family mourned her loss, lamenting that her trusting nature and vulnerability, stemming from her developmental delays, ultimately led to her suffering. With the same level of intelligence as a 12-year-old, she believes she is surrounded by trustworthy individuals. Many people who knew Darren spoke to the media and the police about him. Several of his classmates described him as a strange teenager who was withdrawn and struggled to fit in. It was not surprising that he grew into a cruel internet troll with violent intentions. Detectives discovered a significant amount of incriminating material on his computer, including numerous files of child abuse, which led to additional charges against him. He also showed a disturbing desire for cruelty and torture. Evidence revealed that Denali was not the first victim of this liar. He used various social networks and messaging apps to create fake accounts, deceiving teenagers and even children. Initially, his actions were limited to obtaining obscene images, but feeling untouchable, he escalated his behavior. Over several years, he lured dozens of girls and women into his traps. Some of the victims, from whom he extorted obscene photos, testified in court. Once he received the first image, he began to blackmail them for more. Fortunately, many prior victims managed to escape Darren's grasp, partly due to police threats. Unfortunately, this was not the case for Denali, whom Darren acknowledged was the most naive of his victims. Denali and his accomplices were involved in one of the most serious crimes in Alaskan history, the brutal murder of Cynthia Hoffman. This tragic event highlighted themes of betrayal, greed, and folly. Cynthia fell victim to an online manipulator, failing to verify his identity, and ultimately led 4 others into the murder. The case remained confidential, but the lives of everyone involved were forever altered. In February 2023, Denali Bremer, 23, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder after charges of conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit murder, tampering with evidence, and second-degree murder were dismissed. Nearly a year later, her sentencing will take place over 3 days in January and February 2024. The 99-year sentence is the maximum the court is allowed to impose, according to a press release from the Alaska Department of Justice. Caleb Leland, who provided the car for the crime, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in November 2023 and was sentenced to 30 years in prison in August 2024. On May 17, 2024, Caden McIntosh, 21, pleaded guilty to the murder of Cynthia. Anchorage Superior Court Judge Andrew Peterson accepted Caden's guilty plea to one count of second-degree murder. All other counts were dismissed as part of the agreement. The court will decide Caden's sentence at a sentencing hearing. The agreement between the parties allows the court to sentence Caden to a prison term of 30 to 85 years. Sentencing is scheduled to begin on November 14, 2024, before Judge Peterson and is expected to last 2 days. Caden is currently in the custody of the Alaska Department of Corrections and is no longer eligible for release under the terms of his release. Darren Showmiller, who solicited the murder, was 25 when his trial began. He chose not to defend himself, allowing his lawyer to read a statement to the jury. Darren admitted to making a grave mistake that led to the death of an innocent girl, expressing remorse and asking for forgiveness from her family. However, these words did not sway the jury, and he was sentenced to 99 years in prison for his actions that destroyed multiple lives. Every year on the anniversary of Cynthia's death, her father organizes a motorcycle ride to celebrate. Timothy Hoffman, 58, was among those attending the event on June 2, 2024, when friends and family gathered to remember Cynthia. However, he lost control of his motorcycle and died in the accident. Just after sunrise, a morning exerciser happened to witness a horrifying scene. A young woman was lying lifeless near the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Chapel Hill. There were no clues about what had happened, no sounds, no witnesses, just an eerie silence. Who was she? How did she end up there? And why did her life end so abruptly? As the police started to investigate, they uncovered a tragic story that would impact 2 cities profoundly. Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. She was raised in a loving home by her parents, Teresa and Bob Carson. She grew up with her brother Andrew in Athens, where her exceptional qualities began to emerge. From an early age, Eve distinguished herself academically and socially. At Clark Central High School, her remarkable intelligence and charm led her to become the valedictorian and the student body president, winning 55% of the student vote. These early achievements hint at the bright future she is on her way to creating. Eve's warmth, intellect, and leadership grew even stronger when she began her studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2004. Despite receiving offers from prestigious universities like Princeton and Yale, along with scholarships, Eve opted to attend a public university. She believed in the importance of education and obtained a significant scholarship while pursuing a double major in political science and biology. Her goal was to build a career in the medical field. Outside of her studies, Eve engaged deeply in service and leadership. She led multiple student organizations, completed a challenging 4-year leadership program, and participated in outreach initiatives like Girls on the Run. Additionally, she spent time tutoring children in local schools and worked in underprivileged communities abroad through the Moorhead Cane Summer Enrichment Program. Her volunteer experiences took her to Ecuador, Egypt, and Ghana, where she served in various roles, including medical assistant and community educator. Eve was not just a student leader, she was a beloved figure in her community. Friends admired her, faculty respected her. Her lively spirit made a positive impact wherever she went. However, in March 2008, everything changed. Eve was last seen at home around 1:30 a.m. after deciding to stay in and study while her housemates went out. Sometime between that moment and early morning, she faced an unimaginable tragedy. By 5 a.m., she was missing. Later that morning, authorities found her car at the intersection of North Street and Hillsborough Street in Chapel Hill, following the tip. Tragically, her body was found just a mile from her home. She had been shot and left. Investigators were initially confused by the case. The motive was unclear, and the incident seemed random. With no immediate suspects, law enforcement began examining phone and bank records for clues. A key piece of evidence in the investigation emerged when Eve's abandoned SUV was discovered. Authorities believe Eve Carson was shot multiple times around 5:30 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, with one bullet striking her close range in the right temple. To advance the investigation, Chapel Hill police announced a $25,000 reward for any information that could lead to her killer's arrest. Forensic specialists found that the last activity on Eve's computer occurred at 3:37 a.m., which helped narrow down the time frame in which she might have been abducted. Just 21 minutes later, at 3:55 a.m., her debit card was used at an ATM in University Mall, Chapel Hill. The ATM recorded several transactions, including one that successfully withdrew the maximum daily limit of $700, while 5 additional attempts failed. Fortunately, the ATM surveillance system captured grainy images of the person using the card. The footage showed a young male wearing a black hoodie and cap, and in one frame, there seemed to be a second figure in the back seat of the car, possibly Eve, although the image was too unclear to confirm. At 4:44 a.m., another attempt was made to withdraw money, but no cameras captured the event. Less than 30 minutes later, Eve was shot and killed. However, her debit card was used again that day at 12:39 p.m., with 2 transactions made at a mini-mart on Moorhead Avenue in Durham. Over the next 2 days, several more suspicious transactions occurred, leading to a crucial piece of evidence. On March 7th, at 12:54 a.m., another surveillance camera captured another man attempting to use Eve's card. This individual was clearly not the same as the person filmed at the University Mall ATM, making him a second key suspect. The failed transaction and the clear video footage became pivotal moments in the investigation. As police worked to identify the individuals involved, the communities of Chapel Hill and Athens came together in grief. Eve Carson was buried on March 9, 2008, and her funeral was attended by hundreds of people. At the University of North Carolina, thousands paid their respects with a moment of silence. Initially, the investigation progressed slowly, despite having several images of the suspects. However, on March 12, just 1 week after Eve's murder, authorities received a promising tip. They identified a man who resembled a suspect from the surveillance video as 21-year-old Demario James Atwater. Atwater had a troubled past, with 2 prior felony convictions, making him familiar with the criminal justice system. He had violated parole and committed additional offenses while under supervision, and he was due to appear in court just 2 days before Eve's murder. His criminal record included charges for assault, robbery, trespassing, and banned substance possession with intent to distribute. He had also been caught with a firearm while on probation, but due to an administrative mistake, his court hearing was postponed past the date of Eve's death. Additionally, Atwater's home on Rosedale Avenue in Durham was located close to the crime scene. The investigation picked up momentum when detectives linked Atwater to Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., 17, a young man who closely resembled the person seen on the University Mall ATM footage. Both were school dropouts from Durham and had attended the same school, making their connection concerning. Atwater and Lovett became the main suspects in a case that shocked 2 communities and left a significant void for those who knew and respected Eve Carson. On the morning of March 12, 2008, authorities took action. After gathering substantial evidence and appealing to the public for information, police arrested 21-year-old Demario in Durham, charging him with the first-degree murder of Eve Carson. The case was developing quickly. Chapel Hill's mayor acknowledged the progress made but reminded the public of the profound grief that enveloped the town. A cherished student was lost, and the community was still struggling to cope with her absence. Lovett was eventually found and charged alongside Atwater. Although he was a minor, Lovett had a prior criminal record that included probation for theft and breaking and entering. Both he and Atwater was clear video evidence connecting them to ATM transactions made with Eve's card. The investigation reached a crucial stage in late March when a grand jury indicted both men on multiple serious charges, including first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, armed robbery, possession of a firearm by a felon, felony larceny, and possession of stolen property. Lovett faced additional legal issues as he was also charged in connection with the earlier murder of 29-year-old Abhijit Mahato, a Duke University graduate student from India. Mahato had been kidnapped from his home on January 18, 2008, just weeks before Eve's death. He was forced to withdraw cash from an ATM and was later shot while returning home. There were many similarities between this case and Eve's, but the evidence linking Lovett to Mahuto's murder was not strong enough, leading to his acquittal. Abhijit Mahuto's murder remains unsolved to this day. The legal proceedings in Eve Carson's case have started in earnest. Prosecutors decided to try Atwater and Lovett separately. Atwater, being an adult, faced the possibility of the death penalty, while Lovett, due to his age at the time of the crime, could not receive that sentence. The prosecution began to piece together a disturbing account of events that took place in the early hours of March 5, 2008, a crime driven by greed and chance. Around 1:30 a.m., Eve remained at home to study while her roommates went out. Atwater and Lovett then saw Carson walking toward her car. They stormed into Carson's car with Lovett in the driver's seat and Atwater in the back seat. They forced she into the back seat, where Atwater held her hostage at gunpoint. Investigators concluded that the two were looking for an easy target. Both had been released on bond, were low on money, and had no prior connection to Eve. She was just a stranger they happened to encounter. This marked the start of a tragic series of events that would lead to a brutal and senseless murder. Digital records show that Eve Carson's computer was last active at 3:37 a.m. on March 5, 2008. Shortly after, her life took a tragic turn when she was kidnapped by Atwater and Lovett. They put her in the back seat of her own SUV and drove to several ATMs to withdraw cash. Surveillance cameras captured them at an ATM. Their second attempt at 4:44 a.m. at mall failed because they had already reached Eve's daily withdrawal limit. Lovett told a friend that throughout the ordeal, Carson tried to reason with her captors, telling them that they did not have to do what they were doing. She also begged for her life, telling them that they could take whatever they wanted and that they did not have to kill her. However, Lovett and Atwater decided to kill Carson because she had seen their faces. They took her to a wooded area about a mile from UNC to commit the murder. Carson had been shot 5 times. She was first attacked in the right shoulder, right upper arm, right buttock, right cheek with a .25 caliber pistol. Blood found in Carson's lungs during an autopsy showed that she was still alive and breathing after being attacked with the pistol. The 5th and fatal shot she received was from a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. It went through her right hand, suggesting she was trying to shield herself, into her right temple and brain. According to a forensic psychologist and crime analyst, the way Carson was shot showed a complete lack of respect for others. After his arrest, Demario James Atwater confessed to his involvement in the crime. He confirmed that he was captured on the ATM footage and identified Lovett as his accomplice. To avoid going to trial, Atwater pleaded guilty to all federal charges and directly apologized to Eve's parents during sentencing. On September 23, 2010, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, thus escaping the death penalty. In contrast, Lovett decided to fight the charges against him. He pleaded not guilty to various state offenses, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, larceny, and possession of stolen property. His trial began in December 2011. After 2 weeks, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Complications arose soon after. In 2013, the North Carolina Court of Appeals overturned Lovett's sentence, referencing a U.S. Supreme Court decision that deemed mandatory life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional. Lovett was 17 years old at the time of Eve's murder, which prompted a new sentencing hearing. During this hearing, Lovett spoke to the court, expressing remorse for his actions and acknowledging the pain he had caused. He argued that he was not the monster he was portrayed to be. However, the court upheld its previous decision, sentencing him once more to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision many felt was justified due to the severity of the crime. Since being incarcerated, Lovett has received several disciplinary infractions, indicating limited progress in his rehabilitation. Despite being a minor at the time of the murder, he has continued to display violent and disruptive behavior while in prison. There were further ripples tied to this case. Months after Diario's arrest, his stepbrother Shelton was fatally shot while leaving a party. Unlike Diario, Shelton was not involved in criminal activity, and his death devastated their family, particularly their mother, who, in less than a year, lost both sons in different tragedies. Eve's murder also cast a harsh light on failings within the criminal justice system. At the time of her death, both Lovett and Atwater were on probation and had repeatedly violated the terms of their release. Probation officers failed to respond effectively, even after discovering that Atwater had breached conditions multiple times. In February 2008, an arrest warrant was finally issued for Atwater, and he was taken into custody, but he posted a $10,000 bond and was released just days before Eve's murder. His court date had been scheduled for March 3rd, but was delayed due to administrative errors. 2 days later, Eve was dead. Authorities believe that the desire to recover his lost bond money was a key motivation for Atwater's involvement in the robbery. It is deeply frustrating that a series of bureaucratic failures allowed two dangerous individuals to remain free. The consequences were irreversible. Eve Carson was more than a victim, she was an exceptional young woman whose light touched countless lives. Intelligent, joyful, and driven, she dedicated herself to public service, education, and global outreach. Her legacy of compassion and leadership lives on. In her honor, the University of North Carolina established the Eve Carson Scholarship. The award, designed by students and approved posthumously, reflects Eve's own vision for helping others achieve their potential. It is granted annually to 2 juniors who demonstrate the same commitment to service, leadership, and academic excellence. Eve was considering graduate studies in science policy. Her future was bright, but that story was stolen. For all her achievements, it is the character of Eve Carson that continues to resonate. In her final moments, she chose to respond to hatred with compassion, asking her killers to pray. Even in fear, she embodied grace. Though her life was ended for less than $1,500, her impact was and remains immeasurable. The murder of Eve Carson in March 2008 was more than a singular act of violence. It was a seismic event that shattered the tranquility of Chapel Hill and Athens, exposing the fragility of life and the consequences of systemic shortcomings. Eve, a young woman of boundless potential, embodied the best of humanity: intelligence, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to making the world better. Her senseless death, driven by greed and indifference, left communities grappling with grief and questions that linger to this day. Yet, from this tragedy emerged a powerful testament to her character and influence. The investigation and prosecution of her killers, Demario James Atwater and Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., brought a measure of justice, but it also laid bare the failures of a criminal justice system that allowed 2 individuals with troubled histories to remain free. The bureaucratic oversights that enabled their actions underscore the need for vigilance, reform, and accountability. Eve's death became a catalyst for change, prompting North Carolina to overhaul its probation system and sparking broader conversations about safety and prevention. Her loss was a clarion call to address the cracks in the systems meant to protect us, ensuring that such tragedies are not repeated. Eve Carson's legacy is a challenge to us all, to live purposefully, to serve selflessly, and to confront injustice with resolve. Her life, though tragically brief, was a masterpiece of impact, and her memory continues to shape a better future. On the morning of May 17, 2005, a 911 call came from a quiet home in Alexandria, Kentucky. A woman was screaming, claiming that someone had broken in and shot her husband. When the police arrived, they found the house in chaos. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered everywhere, and broken glass covered the floor. In the bedroom, they discovered a man's body. Initially, it appeared to be a botched robbery, but something felt off about the situation. The children provided different accounts of the event, raising suspicion. Then, the police uncovered a crucial piece of evidence hidden deep inside the washing machine that changed the investigation. What truly happened in the Bosley home that morning? Robert "Bob" Bosley was born on August 6, 1962, in the small town of Alexandria, Kentucky. He grew up in a close-knit, religious family with his siblings. From an early age, Bob demonstrated a sharp intellect and a strong ambition. Although much of his early life is not well documented, It is clear that he started planning his future before he even became an adult. Bob dreamed of becoming wealthy and owning his own business. He began by offering chimney cleaning and minor roof repairs. With long hours, affordable rates, and a strong work ethic, he gained a reputation as a reliable and friendly worker. His hard work paid off. Eventually, Bob expanded his one-man operation into a successful business, Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep in Alexandria. Under his management, the company became known for its quality and reliability, attracting loyal customers and generating impressive profits. With a growing influx of money, Bob aimed for even greater success. He started buying rental properties, eventually owned about 20. These investments significantly increased his income, making him one of the most successful businessmen in the area. His newfound wealth allowed him to enjoy a lavish lifestyle, complete with sports cars, horses, an airplane, a large boat, and a collection of expensive firearms. His boat, frequently spotted on Lake Cumberland, became known for hosting wild adult parties filled with alcohol, music, and scantily dressed attendees. Bob met 18-year-old Amy at one of his favorite local restaurants. Amy, also from Alexandria, grew up in a working-class family and faced financial challenges, especially due to her father's struggles with alcohol. Despite these difficulties, she was determined to create a better life for herself. After graduating high school with top honors in 1986, Amy enrolled in business studies at a community college affiliated with Northern Kentucky University. To support her education, she worked as a waitress, where she met Bob. He was older, wealthy, and charming. Initially shy, Amy soon became captivated by his lifestyle. She began attending his infamous lake parties and quickly became a close friend of his. Eventually, Amy won Bob's heart. After 4 years of dating, they got married. This was a major change for Amy, who had transformed from her modest beginnings to marrying one of the most eligible bachelors in the area. They then started a family, welcoming their daughter Morgan in 1996 and their son Trevor 3 years later. Amy transitioned from her carefree party days to fully embrace her new role as a dedicated mother, swapping late nights at the lake for school events and parenting responsibilities. Bob was expanding his business and investments, but he found one aspect particularly frustrating: administration. Managing payroll, taxes, invoices, and contractors felt burdensome to him. He preferred spending time by the lake rather than being stuck in an office. On weekends, he often disappeared on his boat for days at a time, keeping his location a secret. Friends later noted that Bob seemed to be distancing himself from his family, becoming more involved in a life of indulgence, secrecy. Since Amy had a background in business administration, he asked her to take over the company's financial and administrative tasks. Initially, she was hesitant, but she eventually agreed. From that point on, Amy took charge of managing the company's finances, payroll, and tax responsibilities. The Bosleys seemed to be doing exceptionally well, living in a charming log cabin in the woods south of Alexandria while their dream home was being built close by. This future home was impressive, featuring 14 acres, stained glass windows, a stone tower, and Gothic gargoyles. To everyone else, the Bosleys represented the American dream. They were good-looking, successful, generous with their time, actively involved in their church and their children's school. Bob was known for donating services to low-income families, earning respect throughout the community. However, beneath this fairy tale facade lay a troubling reality. As the administrator, Amy had access to the company's complete financial situation. While Bob focused on expanding the business, the lake, and building their dream home, Amy secretly started redirecting company funds. Instead of paying taxes, she funneled the money into a personal account that was hidden from view. For years, this embezzlement went unnoticed, but the IRS eventually caught on. They sent multiple letters, made phone calls, and tried to schedule meetings, but Bob never received any of these communications. Amy had ensured that all IRS correspondence was sent to a private mailbox she controlled, fully aware that the government was closing in but thinking she could delay things indefinitely. On the morning of Tuesday, May 17, 2005, just days before their 15th wedding anniversary, everything changed. Around 5 a.m., Amy Bosley made a frantic 911 call. Her panicked voice filled the line until the call was abruptly interrupted by a loud crash. The dispatchers attempted to reconnect. Shortly after, law enforcement rushed to the Bosley cabin. When they arrived, they found Amy in shock, holding her children. Her sister soon arrived to take care of the kids while Amy was taken in for questioning. Police secured the area and contacted the crime scene unit. As daylight broke, more officers arrived to search the nearby forest with K-9 units and a helicopter, looking for what they suspected was a fleeing intruder. In the bedroom, they found Bob's lifeless body. He was kneeling beside the bed, leaning forward, and had multiple gunshot wounds. However, only 2 shell casings were found in the room, which added to the confusion. As detectives examined the evidence, they started to doubt the authenticity of the crime scene and the entire narrative surrounding it. Except for the children's rooms, the rest of the house was chaotic. Kitchen cabinets were left wide open, including those under the sink, which seemed odd for a thief to rummage through. A rear door had a broken window, indicating a potential entry point, but surprisingly, most of the broken glass was outside rather than inside. This inconsistency raised suspicions from the beginning. The disorder continued elsewhere in the house. In the bathroom, the mirrored cabinet was open, and prescription bottles were strewn across the floor. It appeared more like a staged mess than the result of a rushed intruder. According to Amy's 911 call, the alleged attacker had left quickly, so why was there such a mess? As crime scene investigators examined the house, detectives began interviewing Amy Bosley at the police station. She seemed shaken and at times distressed, but appeared confused, as if she was having trouble remembering the details of her story. Amy described the intruder as a white male with a nasal voice, bad breath, and a strong odor of urine. She claimed he burst in during the night. He attacked both her and Bob. She had 2 marks on her chest, which she said were from the assault. When detectives asked who might have wanted to harm Bob, Amy indicated that he wasn't very popular, suggesting he had a wild reputation that could have led to enemies among disgruntled employees. She specifically mentioned a contractor and longtime friend of Bob, as someone with whom Bob had recently had a disagreement. However, the friend was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He had a solid alibi and was very upset about Bob's death. Panic spread throughout the Alexandria community as schools were closed for several days due to the fear of a killer at large. Residents struggled to accept that Bob, a kind and generous man known for his willingness to help others, had been brutally murdered in his own home. Meanwhile, detectives at the cabin searched for clues. They found only 2 shell casings near Bob's body, despite multiple gunshot wounds, prompting them to look in the basement. There, in the family's washing machine, they discovered wet clothing and, at the bottom, a folded cloth with 4 additional shell casings. It was puzzling. Why would a fleeing killer hide evidence in a washing machine inside the victim's home? Even more unusual was an aluminum baseball bat found nearby, showing fresh scratches and white residue. Further lab analysis would be necessary to understand its potential relevance. Amy has been released and can now reunite with her children, but new details are emerging. The crime scene looks suspiciously arranged. Valuables, including large amounts of cash, were left alone. Amy's emotional reaction seems insincere. She showed no tears or genuine sorrow. Investigators believe there may be hidden motives. Then, a significant development occurred. IRS staff visited the station after learning about Bob's death. They had been trying to reach him for months regarding an enormous unpaid tax bill of over $1.7 million. A meeting was set for the day Bob died. The IRS agents also revealed an odd detail. During a previous call, they had spoken to someone who claimed to be Bob, but the voice sounded strange, high-pitched and unnatural. They suspected it was a woman pretending to be a man, and that voice may have belonged to Amy. The motive is now clear. Amy, who was responsible for managing the company's finances, had embezzled millions of dollars by redirecting tax payments into her personal account. Bob, completely unaware of her actions, he will learn the truth as soon as the IRS is ready to confront him. To make matters worse, there were allegations of Bob's infidelities. His sister later told investigators that she overheard Amy say she would shoot Bob if he ever cheated on her or left her. At the time, it seemed like a joke, but it now felt like a serious threat. Despite the growing evidence against her, Amy Bosley continues to deny any involvement in her husband's murder. During her second interrogation, she insists that she loved Bob, even though their marriage had its issues. She acknowledges that they faced problems, as many couples do, but argues there was no reason for her to harm the father of her children. Investigators, however, have a different perspective. Ballistics tests confirm that all 6 bullets that hit Bob correspond to 6 casings found, 2 in the bedroom and 4 concealed in the washing machine. A crucial development in the investigation occurred when Morgan and Trevor Bosley, ages 9 and 6, were interviewed separately. Both children provided the same description of the events. They had gone to bed peacefully but were suddenly awakened by the sound of 6 gunshots, followed by the sound of glass breaking. In contrast, Amy reported that the glass broke first and then the shots rang out, indicating inconsistencies in her story. Additionally, the scratches on her chest, which she claimed were from a struggle with the intruder, raised suspicions. The marks were too symmetrical, resembling staged wounds rather than genuine defensive injuries. A closer look at her blouse revealed that it hadn't been torn during the supposed attack. Instead, it had been carefully cut with scissors and then ripped to make it look damaged. Less than 2 weeks after Bob was murdered, authorities arrested Amy Bosley and charged her with the crime. However, there was one critical piece of evidence still missing: the murder weapon. Eventually, the weapon was found, but the circumstances of its discovery are unclear. One account states that a pistol from Bob's gun collection was discovered hidden in Amy's handbag, behind a wardrobe. Another version suggests that the weapon was found later by Amy's sister, who had taken care of Amy's children and belongings that night. While going through Amy's purse, she allegedly found the gun and promptly informed a lawyer, who then turned it over to the police. Regardless of how it was obtained, ballistic testing confirmed that the gun matched the 6 shell casings found at the crime scene and in the laundry. Although the bullets recovered from Bob's body were too damaged to establish a direct match, the circumstantial evidence against Amy was substantial. As the trial opened, prosecutors presented a straightforward and damaging story. For years, Amy had secretly embezzled money from Bob's company by diverting tax payments to herself. She had managed to evade the IRS through mail redirection and deceit, but her luck had finally run out. On May 17, 2005, Bob was set to meet with IRS agents who were insisting on explanations. Amy understood what this meeting signified: being exposed, facing divorce, and possible prison time. In response, the once respected wife, mother, and community volunteer came up with a desperate plan. The night before her meeting with the IRS, Amy, with her children asleep nearby, quietly took one of Bob's guns. Some sources claim she sedated the children first. While Bob was asleep, she shot him. Although wounded, he woke up and tried to defend himself. Investigators noted the way he was injured suggested he lunged at her, unaware that she was the one holding the gun. In shock and bleeding, Bob was unable to overpower her. She attacked him again. By the end of the incident, Bob Bosley, who had built his wealth from nothing, and who had put his trust in Amy, was dead in the home they were planning to share. Amy, who once supported him, now faced charges for orchestrating his murder, not out of fear, but out of greed. Bob Bosley's carefully built life of luxury and respect crumbled in one night due to cold calculations. What was left was a broken family, a shocked community, and an unforgettable legacy of betrayal. She smashed the back glass door with a baseball bat, rifled through cabinets and drawers to create the illusion of a burglary. Next, she concealed 4 spent bullet casings wrapped in cloth at the bottom of the washing machine. To make her injuries look real, Amy lightly cut her chest with what appeared to be scissors and slashed her blouse to suggest a struggle. She concluded her act with a 911 call, her voice filled with panic and the scene meticulously staged. Forensic evidence presented a different perspective on the case. Laboratory tests showed that glass fragments found on the aluminum bat matched the pieces from the broken rear door. The bat, which Amy's children recognized as belonging to their family, had not been used by an intruder. Instead, it was used by Amy herself. The police found no footprints, vehicle tracks, or any signs of anyone fitting the description Amy gave. No one had entered or left the house that night. Investigators also uncovered details about the Bosleys' marriage. Amy believed Bob had cheated on her. Photos discovered in their safe, taken during wild parties at Lake Cumberland, revealed a secret lifestyle and confirmed at least one affair. While the emotional pain of betrayal was evident, the real motive ran much deeper. Amy had embezzled the large amount of money from Bob's company by skimming off funds and failing to pay taxes. She thought that by killing him, she could keep her secret safe. Without Bob, his assets could cover the debt, allowing her to keep the remaining funds. The defense argued that the bullet casings could have come from Bob's pockets after a trip to the shooting range, but the evidence against Amy continued to mount. Despite this, her lawyer pointed out that there were no eyewitnesses, no DNA evidence, and no clear connection between the bullet casings and the bullets found in Bob's body. This ambiguity provided a chance to influence the jury's decision. Fearing that Amy might be acquitted and wanting to protect the Bosley children from the trauma of testifying against their mother, the prosecutors offered a plea deal. This would allow Amy to avoid a trial, spare her children the emotional strain, and receive a lighter sentence. In return, she would admit her guilt without revealing what had happened to the stolen millions. On November 2, 2006, Amy Bosley appeared in a Campbell County courtroom wearing a green and white prison jumpsuit. Her expression was impossible to read. Before the sentencing took place, Bob's family spoke directly to her. His brother accused her of being a liar and a fraud, warning her that although she might gain her freedom one day, she would never escape the memories of her actions. He reminded her that every night, she would see Bob's face and remember the tears of his children who were left without a father. Bob's sister fixed her gaze on Amy and asked the haunting question that troubled them all: did he beg you to stop? The answer would never be known. Next, Bob's mother approached, heartbroken and shaking, as she read a letter expressing her grief for the final goodbye that never happened. Amy remained silent, looking down and wiping away her tears. The judge acknowledged the damage Amy had caused, not just to her husband, but also to her children, her community, and her own future. He sentenced her to 20 years in prison. According to Kentucky law, she would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence, which equated to 17 years in prison. On May 18, 2022, exactly 17 years after Bob was murdered, Amy Bosley, who was 54 at the time, was released from the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. Most news outlets barely covered her release, and her current whereabouts are unknown. Some speculate that she may be trying to find the millions of dollars she had embezzled. Bob is buried at St. Stephen Cemetery in Campbell County, Kentucky. He is remembered for his kindness, ambition, and dedication to his family, tragically killed by someone he trusted deeply. In retrospect, Amy's choices appear both tragic and irrational. She was not in financial distress, and her husband was not abusive. The IRS may have offered a solution to her financial issues, or if she sought revenge, a divorce could have made her wealthier and free. Instead, she opted for murder. Magdalena Aguilar Romero, a vibrant young woman with great potential, repeatedly sought help to protect herself from her abusive ex-husband. Despite her persistent pleas for safety, she received no response. Magdalena, also known as Magda Aguilar Romero, later took on the last name Arciniega after her marriage. She was born on November 18, 1990, in Tasca de Alarcón, a mining town in Guerrero, southwestern Mexico. As the youngest of 3 siblings and the only daughter of their family, she was raised in a challenging environment. Her father worked in a local silver mine, which was a demanding and hazardous job. Despite the health and safety risks, his work provided a steady income to support their large family. Her mother was a stay-at-home mom who focused on raising her 3 children and managing the household. With her husband's reliable income, the family always had what they needed. While they weren't rich, they lived in a spacious and comfortable home. Their sons and Magdalena went to good schools. They participated in sports and other activities. By the mid-1990s, they bought their first car. Magdalena's parents and older brothers cherished, pampered her. She was smart, kind, and sociable. She excelled in school. In middle school, she developed a strong interest in biology and anatomy. Initially, Magdalena aspired to become a cardiologist, but in high school, her focus shifted to nutrition, healthy eating, and wellness. She decided to pursue a career in this area to help people facing health issues related to their diet and eating habits. When Magdalena told her family about her plans, they fully supported her. As a dedicated student, she easily gained admission to a top university to study nutrition. She was determined to become an expert in her field. Instead of moving into the dorms, Magdalena chose to live at home with her family, commuting to university by bus, despite the nearly hour-long journey each way. She still managed to keep up with her sports activities and attended dance classes. Her intense focus on her studies left little time for a personal life, but everything changed in 2011. That year, 20-year-old Magdalena met 35-year-old Cesar Gomez Arciniega, who also hailed from Tosca del Arcon. Cesar owned a successful bar that was a beloved spot in the neighborhood. Locals frequented it to relax after work, share stories, enjoy delicious food, and drink what many considered the best beer in town. Initially, Magdalena ignored the advances and romantic gestures from the older man, Cesar. However, he was persistent. He proved to be intelligent, well-read, and genuinely engaging. He wooed her with poetry, flowers, meaningful gifts. Eventually, she found him charming, succumbed to his attention. Their relationship progressed rapidly. At first, Cesar appeared reliable and mature, someone she could envision a future with. Shortly after they started dating, Magdalena found out she was pregnant. This news shocked her, but Cesar was thrilled. He promptly expressed his desire to marry her. Magdalena agreed to his proposal. Both her family and Cesar's relatives supported the marriage, with no objections or obstacles to their union. In 2011, they officially tied the knot in a simple ceremony at a local chapel, attended by only close relatives and a few friends. After the wedding, Magdalena moved into Cesar's home, which was located in the same building as his bar. At that time, she was in her third year of college, but with a baby on the way and the responsibilities of being a newlywed, she chose to pause her studies to focus on her expanding family. Cesar supported this decision. He was thrilled to have his young wife close by. With a steady income from the family business, Magdalena didn't have to work and had everything she needed. She adjusted to domestic life. Soon they welcomed their first son. Less than a year later, Magdalena discovered she was expecting again. In the summer of 2013, she gave birth to their second son. Things began to change in early 2014 when Magdalena decided to go back to school to complete her degree. This decision led to strong opposition from her husband, Cesar, who insisted she should wait a few more years. He argued that their young sons needed their mother at home full-time. However, Magdalena was eager to return to her studies, especially since her parents were willing to help take care of the boys. They fully supported her ambition to finish her education. Magdalena quickly adjusted to being a student again, but Cesar reacted negatively. He became increasingly jealous and controlling, wanting to know her whereabouts at all times and often starting arguments over minor issues. Initially, Magdalena thought his behavior would improve, but instead, it only escalated. Cesar had developed an overwhelming need to control everything during their nearly 3.5 years of marriage. Under the pretense of acting in her best interests, he gradually isolated Magdalena from her friends and family. Their marriage occurred just a few months after they met when she was already pregnant, leaving her with little time or energy to socialize. After the births of their two sons in quick succession, she became even more detached from the outside world. Now that she had returned to school, Magdalena was beginning to rebuild her social life. She reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and started visiting her parents regularly, who were excited to spend time with their grandsons. Cesar began to check Magdalena's phone every day, monitor her social media accounts, and watch her closely. His jealousy intensified, leading him to become unjustly suspicious and accuse her of things she had never done. He forbade her from wearing makeup or perfume, wouldn't allow her to wear heels, even started choosing her clothes for her. To avoid fights, Magdalena reluctantly accepted his demands, but that wasn't enough for Cesar. Eventually, he issued an ultimatum: she could no longer go to college. However, Magdalena was determined not to give up on her dreams of becoming a certified nutritionist, especially when she had just over a year left until graduation. This situation turned her life into a daily struggle as Cesar continued to impose new restrictions and rules to control her actions. By spring 2014, after ongoing pressure and emotional manipulation, Magdalena had to pause her education again. Influenced by him, she stopped communicating with her friends, even her relatives. She rarely left her house and completely stopped visiting her parents. Her parents grew suspicious when Magdalena missed a family celebration, something she had always attended. Her excuse was vague: she said she was swamped with housework. A month later, she also missed her grandmother's birthday and her parents' wedding anniversary. During phone calls with her mother, Magdalena seemed distant. She gave short answers, avoided direct questions, as if someone was listening nearby. Once lively, cheerful, she had become withdrawn. She stopped allowing family visits and made excuses whenever someone wanted to come over. One day, her older brother visited unexpectedly and was shocked by what he saw. Magdalena looked completely different. She had lost significant weight, seemed fearful and exhausted. She neglected her own well-being, flinched at the smallest noises. It turned out that Cesar had been taking her phone away and only let her make calls when he was around. He had broken her spirit, even started showing aggression in front of their young sons. Despite this, when her older brother offered to take them back to their parents' home, Magdalena refused. She insisted that she would manage on her own. Her brother couldn't remain silent about what he had witnessed. He informed their parents everything, and together they began discussing how to help Magdalena. However, they struggled to communicate with her freely because Cesar was always nearby. He treated her like property, someone he could control entirely, and he had no intention of letting her go. In August 2014, after yet another episode of aggression, Magdalena reached her breaking point. Once Cesar left to run an errand, she discreetly contacted her brother, asked for his help to escape. She quickly packed only essential items and documents, gathered her children, and sneaked out through the back door to avoid running into Cesar's mother, who lived with them. Despite witnessing the abuse, her mother-in-law had always supported her son. The brother took Magdalena and the boys to their parents' house. As expected, Cesar became very angry when he learned that his wife had left with their children. He went to his in-laws' home, demanding Magdalena return, but her father and brothers prevented him from entering, threatened to call the police if he didn't leave right away. The next few months were like a nightmare for Magdalena and her sons. They only left the house when accompanied by her father or brothers because they were afraid Cesar might try to kidnap them. Magdalena reached out to the local authorities for protection from her partner's harassment, but the police did not consider her situation to be a serious threat and denied her request for help. A month after moving out, Magdalena decided to file for divorce. At that point, Cesar changed his approach. He started apologizing and begging her to return, insisting he had changed and would never harm her again, while expressing his love for her. However, Magdalena didn't believe him. She knew him well enough to see that he was just trying to manipulate her again. For a while, he attempted to persuade her to come back, but when he realized she was not going to return, he resorted to threats, emotional pressure. Magdalena often felt anxious, constantly checking her surroundings in fear that he might appear unexpectedly. She visited the police twice more in hopes of obtaining a restraining order against Cesar, but both times her requests were denied. The officers insisted that she was not in any real danger. By early 2015, their divorce was finalized. The court decided that their sons would live with their mother while their father would have visitation rights, including weekends and holidays. At that point, Cesar seemed to have calmed down. He stopped reaching out to his ex-wife and appeared to be moving on with his life. This change allowed Magdalena to finally relax. She returned to college, earned her degree, soon found a good job at a private clinic in her field. Surrounded by friends and family, she began to thrive, earning a stable income and making plans for her future. Nearly 3 years had gone by since the divorce. Cesar no longer attempted to interfere in Magdalena's life. He adhered to the set schedule for picking up and dropping off the boys. Sometimes, Magdalena would go to his house to collect them, but she never went by herself. Her father or one of her brothers always accompanied her. Although Cesar tried to be friendly, Magdalena never felt completely safe around him. Deep down, she knew she could never trust him again. The years she spent living with him, filled with emotional and physical abuse, had left a lasting impact. On January 13, 2018, the boys were with their father. The Romero family was supposed to attend a memorial service at a local church for a recently deceased relative that day. Magdalena informed her mother that she would be late because Cesar, the boys' father, had refused to take them to the church. She arranged to pick them up herself and agreed to meet Cesar at a park near his house. After waiting for about 30 minutes, Cesar called to inform her that he had a sudden errand and had left the boys with his mother, who was unwell and unable to bring them to the park. With no other option, Magdalena decided to go directly to her former mother-in-law's house. While on her way, she called her mother to explain the situation and assured her she would arrive at the church within 30 minutes with the boys. That was the last time her mother heard from her daughter. Magdalena never arrived at the church. Her phone first went unanswered and then was turned off completely. Concerned about Magdalena, her parents started contacting her friends, but no one had seen her. Trying to reach Cesar also yielded no results. That night, filled with increasing worry, the Romeros went to the police to report Magdalena as missing. However, the officers did not take their concerns seriously. They pointed out that Magdalena was an adult and not required to check in regularly, adding that it had only been a few hours since anyone had last heard from her. The following day, the police again declined to start a formal search for the same reasons. Magdalena's parents took action, reaching out to everyone they knew for help. They quickly informed relatives and friends, who joined the search for her. News of Magdalena's disappearance spread rapidly on social media, with many sharing her and her son's photos, urging anyone with information to speak up. Flyers were put up throughout the town and on utility poles. When her parents visited Cesar's house, he refused to let them in. He expressed worry about Magdalena and the boys being missing, but he falsely claimed she had taken them and mentioned visiting someone. In reality, Magdalena had told her mother she was going to pick up the boys from Cesar's house to take them to church. The Romeros soon realized something was wrong and suspected that Cesar was not telling the truth. They approached the police again, but the authorities still would not open a missing persons case. They also refused to question Cesar or search his home, claiming there was no reason to do so. Feeling hopeless, Magdalena's parents kept searching on their own for over a week. As their fear and frustration increased, they began to organize public demonstrations to raise awareness about the case and pressure the authorities to act. Eventually, these efforts started to yield results. A neighbor of Cesar contacted the police to report that the boys were at their father's house. Other witnesses later stated they had seen Magdalena entering Cesar's home on the day she disappeared, but no one saw her leave. The public outcry from the Romero family eventually compelled law enforcement to take action. On January 22, 2018, a search warrant was issued for Cesar's residence. What investigators found inside was shocking. The police said that Romero's legs and arms were found inside a pot on the stove, while her cooked pelvis was discovered in a bag near the stove. The rest of her body was found in a nearby refrigerator. Cesar and his mother were caught off guard by the arrival of the police and had not cleaned the area beforehand. The officers brought in Magdalena's parents to identify her remains. The state of her body was distressing, but her parents quickly recognized their daughter. The shock was overwhelming for her mother, and she needed immediate medical help. A forensic examination revealed that Magdalena had suffered severe beatings before her death, which was caused by mechanical asphyxiation. She had been strangled. The most distressing detail that came to light later was that their sons, only 6 and 4.5 years old at the time, had been inside the house throughout the entire incident and witnessed everything. The violent attack on their mother occurred right in front of them. Sadly, they became important witnesses in the subsequent court case. Even though they were young and didn't fully understand what had happened, the older son later told investigators that he saw his father hitting and choking his mother as she screamed, tried to escape. He remembered how Cesar dragged her into the kitchen while their grandmother tried to keep the boys from coming in. The older boy disobeyed and peeked inside, only to see something terrifying. Cesar quickly became the main suspect. However, when the police arrived, they only found his mother and the boys at the house. Cesar had somehow escaped just hours before the search, almost as if he knew the authorities were coming. He took as much cash as he could and disappeared. That same day, his mother was arrested and taken to jail to await trial. She remained calm, even indifferent, when confronted by the police. She did not deny her role in the incidents involving her former daughter-in-law and showed no signs of remorse. Cesar's mother had always been aware of how her son treated his wife, but she consistently sided with Cesar. The investigation showed that while she didn't directly commit the crime, she was aware of her son's plans. She helped bring Magdalena to their home and concealing the evidence. Detectives were particularly disturbed by one aspect of the case: some body parts were cooked into a thick stew. Cesar's mother could not provide a clear explanation for these actions. During the trial, Magdalena's sons testified against Cesar's mothers, as they had witnessed the traumatic events involving their mother. The older boy had sneaked into the kitchen and saw hands boiling in a pot, along with his mother's head in the freezer. The trauma from these experiences was profound, requiring extensive therapy for the boys to start healing and to overcome their nightmares. In November 2019, the court found Cesar's mother guilty of concealment of evidence. Throughout the proceedings, she never expressed any remorse for her actions. The main suspect, Cesar, was the focus of a nationwide manhunt, but authorities could not locate him right after the incident. His mother said she did not know where he had gone. Despite significant media attention, public protests calling for justice, and extensive searches, Cesar remained missing. Authorities searched for him for over 4 years, both in Mexico and internationally, even enlisting Interpol's help, but all leads eventually went cold. In early July 2022, an unexpected incident occurred in Tijuana, a border city, when a bar fight broke out between two drunk patrons. The police arrested both men, one of whom was identified as Massimo Herrera Garcia. However, once at the police station, fingerprint analysis revealed he was actually Cesar Gomez Arciniega, a wanted fugitive who had been living under a false identity to escape capture. His intoxicated and aggressive behavior led to his arrest. After being identified, he was sent back to his hometown to await trial. He stalled the legal process by frequently changing attorneys, delaying the trial until fall 2023. By that time, Magdalena's sons had grown older and could better articulate their experiences. They testified against their father. In November 2023, Cesar was convicted of the premeditated and brutal murder of his ex-wife. The court deemed the crime as gender-based, recognizing that it stemmed from years of accumulated desire for revenge after their divorce. He received a sentence of 55 years in prison without the chance for parole. Magdalena's sons were then placed in the care of their maternal grandparents, who had worked tirelessly to seek justice for their mother.
Before the summer of 1988, the Carr family enjoyed a happy life in the small town of Alturas. They were known for their strong faith and attended church every Sunday, embodying a peaceful, trouble-free family. However, their calm life was disrupted on June 14th, when 17-year-old Dwayne found a threatening letter in their mailbox. The anonymous note was alarming, warning the family to leave Florida or face serious consequences. Distressed, Dwayne quickly showed the letter to his parents. His mother, Peggy, was filled with fear, while his father, Pi, dismissed it as a prank. As summer transitioned into fall, the family's anxiety increased, peaking on October 23rd when Peggy suddenly became seriously ill. She suffered from intense nausea and severe pain, and strikingly, her hair began to fall out in large clumps. Despite her worsening condition, Pi insisted on not taking Peggy to the hospital, thinking it was just a temporary illness. However, Peggy's health rapidly deteriorated, and within a week, she fell into a coma. To make matters worse, Dwayne started showing the same troubling symptoms as his mother. This alarming situation led to a police investigation. On December 2nd, authorities made a shocking discovery. The sickness affecting the Carr family was caused by thallium, a deadly chemical often used in rat poison. Tests revealed that every family member, including Pi, had dangerously high levels of this poison in their bodies. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that someone was deliberately targeting the Carr family. The letter they received was not a joke. It was a warning of the danger ahead. Authorities now had to work quickly to identify the person responsible and prevent further harm. Turn back time. In 1988, Dwayne was happily living with his family in the peaceful town of Alturas, Florida. His mother, Peggy, worked hard as a waitress at a local diner. After raising 3 children by herself, she found love with Pi Carr, who had 2 children of his own, creating a blended family. Life in Alturas seemed perfect. It was a quiet place where people left their doors unlocked, ideal for raising a family. However, on October 23rd, everything changed in a tragic way. Early in the morning, Peggy went to work as usual. However, shortly after arriving at the diner, she began experiencing a burning sensation in her legs and feet, followed by severe chest pain. She was quickly taken to the hospital, where her condition left her nearly incapacitated. Despite extensive tests, doctors were unable to determine the cause of her symptoms and sent her home with pain relief medication. A week later, on October 30th, Peggy and Dwayne, along with Dwayne's stepbrother, Travis, were taken to the hospital with severe symptoms. The pain was so intense that they were brought to tears, and they were scared for their lives. Peggy was admitted to the intensive care unit, where an infectious disease specialist noticed something troubling, suggesting possible poisoning. He decided to test for thallium, a toxic substance banned in the U.S. since 1972, but still found in some old rat poisons. The test results were shocking. Peggy had 50 times the deadly amount of thallium in her body. The following day, October 31st, she fell into a coma. Travis needed a respirator, and Dwayne showed no signs of getting better. The police quickly started an investigation with a clear goal: to identify the source of the poisoning and prevent more harm. They searched the orange groves, tested the neighborhood's water supply, and even investigated the diner where Peggy worked, but found no signs of thallium. As news broke, panic spread through the community. Concerned citizens demanded answers, anxious about their safety. Investigators arrived at the Carr home, carefully collecting dust samples and over 400 household items for testing. One item of particular concern was a 6-pack of Coke bottles, 3 of which were unopened. Tests showed that each bottle contained more than a gram of thallium, enough to be lethal to an adult. The lead detective understood that there were 2 possible explanations. Either the Coke had been tampered with at the factory, or it had been contaminated elsewhere. If it was factory tampering, many more people might have consumed the poison, potentially affecting not just the county, but the entire state or even the nation. This fear led locals to hesitate before drinking Coke. The investigation initially targeted the bottling company. However, thanks to Coca-Cola's cooperation, it was quickly determined that large-scale tampering was not possible. It was found that tampering with the product at the plant could not physically happen. As a result, the police concluded that this was a deliberate attack on Peggy Carr and her family. The investigation focused on family members, with Peggy's husband, Pi Carr, becoming a key suspect. Although they had been married for just 7 months, their initial happiness had faded quickly. Pi spent long hours working at the mine, which made Peggy increasingly suspicious of him. One night, she caught him with another woman, further deepening her concerns. During the weekend that Peggy became ill, Pi happened to be out of town. When he returned, he was reluctant to take her to the hospital. As investigators looked further into Pi's past, they tried to find a reason why he would poison his wife. However, one question continued to trouble the police. Why would Pi also poison his own son? Travis. During the interrogation, Pi shared an intriguing piece of information. On June 14th, 4 months before Peggy got sick, Dwayne discovered a letter in the mailbox. Inside, there was a yellow post-it note with a typewritten warning telling the family to leave Florida within 2 weeks or they would face death. At first, Dwayne and his siblings found it funny, but now Pi's lack of concern appeared more suspicious. The police discovered that unsettling events had previously occurred in the Carr household. A few years earlier, 2 of their dogs had died unexpectedly, showing signs of severe illness and hair loss. This raised a disturbing possibility that they might have been subjected to experimentation. As Peggy's condition worsened, Dwayne and Travis showed no signs of getting better. The entire family was tested for thallium. The results were shocking. Every family member, including Pi Carr, had trace amounts of thallium in their system. This finding ruled Pi out as a suspect, since it seemed unlikely that someone would commit such a crime while also risking their own exposure to the poison. Even Peggy's 2-year-old granddaughter, Casey, had traces of thallium. On March 3, 1989, after 5 months of suffering, Peggy's health took a tragic turn for the worse. Dwayne was summoned to her bedside one last time as the family made the painful decision to take her off life support. Peggy Carr passed away at the age of 41, leaving her family in deep sorrow. Peggy's death shifted the investigation to a murder case. Poisoning is an unusual and deliberate method of killing, typically associated with a particularly clever and disturbed individual. When the FBI examined the contaminated Coke bottles, they discovered tiny scratch marks, suggesting that the bottles had been carefully altered. Thallium had been added, the caps resealed, and the bottles looked untouched. Since thallium is both tasteless and odorless, it dissolves easily without leaving typical signs like overflow, discoloration, or sediment in soda. The careful mixture found in the Coke bottles indicates that the perpetrator possessed advanced chemistry knowledge, an exceptionally intelligent person who thought they were more cunning than everyone else. Police began to interview neighbors and townspeople in Alturas, a small community with only a few hundred residents, as they searched for the person responsible for this terrible crime. The closest neighbors to the Carr family were George James Trepal and his wife, Diana. When detectives questioned Trepal, he reacted with surprising anger, criticizing the redneck children and family living nearby. When asked who anyone would want to harm the Carr family, George gave a disturbingly detailed answer. He believed someone wanted them to move away. This was exactly the same message found in a threatening letter sent to the Carrs, a detail known only to the police. This unusual response led investigators to consider Trepal as a prime suspect. Further investigation revealed that George was a self-taught chemist, while his wife, Diana, held a master's degree in chemistry. Both were part of an elite society for individuals with an IQ in the top 2% of the population. Investigators then uncovered George's criminal history. He had previously served time in prison for his role as the chemist in a large methamphetamine operation. One key ingredient used in making methamphetamine is thallium. The news that George was a person of interest surprised even Peggy's son, Dwayne, who found it hard to believe that Trepal was capable of such a terrible crime. The detectives found out that Trepal had a prior altercation with the Carr family over loud music. Just 2 days after this dispute, Peggy Carr was poisoned. Although there were connections between the two events, the police did not have sufficient evidence to arrest Trepal. Typically, police procedures involve questioning a suspect in hopes of securing a confession. However, detectives felt this tactic would not be effective with Trepal, who is introverted and avoids confrontation. Therefore, the FBI suggested an alternative approach. Someone needed to go undercover to outwit Trepal. The police assigned Special Agent to go undercover in the group that George Trepal was part of. The goal was to earn Trepal's trust and collect enough evidence to demonstrate his involvement in the poisoning. At first, it appeared that the agent would only need to work undercover for a weekend. However, she was cautioned about Trepal's exceptional memory. If he saw her, he might remember her face, or car. She, using a fake identity, was getting ready to attend a murder mystery event organized by George Trepal and his wife, Diana. She pretended to be a woman about to divorce her abusive husband. On April 14, 1989, she arrived at the local hotel where the gathering was taking place. As she entered, she was met by George himself. Seeing him, she felt anxious that he might recognize her from previous surveillance. She took a deep breath and looked for any indication that he knew her, but Trepal didn't seem to remember her. Still, she had to stay alert in her undercover role. She understood that Trepal was not likely to confront someone directly. He preferred to poison his victims, leading to a slow and painful death. The agent signed up for the event and received a packet with all the weekend details prepared by Trepal himself. The pamphlet outlined several carefully crafted murder scenarios, including one that involved poisoning. One paragraph caught her attention. It stated that when a death threat arrives, cautious individuals should discard all their food and be mindful of what they consume. This alarming similarity reminded she of the death threat the Carr family had received just before Peggy was poisoned, reinforcing her belief that they had identified the right suspect. Throughout the weekend, the agent spoke with Trepal, carefully monitoring his every word, aware that any mistake could cost her life. When Trepal inquired about her background, she fabricated a story about her husband, a lawyer from Houston, Texas, whom she claimed to have left. Trepal revealed that he could detect lies by observing the movement of a person's neck muscles, which made she even more anxious. Before the weekend concluded, she revealed to Trepal her plan to move to Florida in order to escape her husband. This confession led to an important development. Trepal mentioned that he and his wife were considering relocating their practice and selling their house. After meeting with her supervisors, the agent was told to extend her undercover operation beyond the original weekend. She recognized this as an opportunity to gather important evidence that could lead to a search warrant for Trepal's house. Her goal was to find lab equipment or chemicals that would connect Trepal to the crime. The next week, she visited Trepal's house. During the visit, Trepal bragged about how safe Alturas was and how nobody locked their doors. While she spotted several suspicious items, such as a secret passage in the library and a mannequin dressed in bondage gear, none of these were enough to obtain a search warrant. Despite her failed plan, the agent continued to act, committed to collecting more evidence. She understood the dangers involved. Revealing her real identity could put her and her family at risk. Trepal, who was very clever, might resort to poisoning her if he found out she was an undercover detective. Over the next few months, she met with Trepal for several lunch dates, always being watched closely. She avoided eating or drinking anything after leaving the table, cautious of Trepal's potential to harm her. During these meetings, Trepal progressively showed his contempt for those he deemed less intelligent, which provided she with a glimpse into his mindset. After 8 months, the agent had gathered many small pieces of evidence, but it wasn't enough to form a strong case. Her supervisors started to doubt the operation's worth and considered shutting it down. For the agent, giving up was not an option. She felt a deep responsibility to seek justice for Peggy Carr and her family, thinking about how it could have been her own loved ones who ingested the poison. In December 1989, the agent received an important call she had been anticipating. George and Diana Trepal had relocated and offered her the opportunity to move into their home. With this offer, the agent gained legal permission to enter the house without needing a warrant, allowing her to invite the county crime scene unit to conduct an investigation. Suspecting that Trepal was too intelligent to leave obvious signs of thallium, the investigation team concentrated on searching for residues in areas such as the air conditioning filter and drains. The house still contained many of Trepal's belongings, which provided plenty of chances to collect samples. In the garage, investigators found vials and chemistry bottles, hoping that one of them would test positive for thallium. While waiting for results from the FBI lab, the agent struggling to come up with new ways to engage Trepal. As time passed, she realized that by January 1990, with no updates from the lab, she needed to take matters into her own hands. She aimed to trick Treppel into incriminating himself, not knowing that he was preparing his own deception. The agent scheduled a meeting with Treppel at a picnic area behind a McDonald's, near where he lived. This important meeting was recorded. During their discussion, she gave Treppel a business card that she claimed had been left by detectives looking for him. Treppel reacted noticeably. He became very anxious and visibly unsettled as he tried to stay calm. He repeatedly invited she to visit his new house, but she declined. The atmosphere was tense, leaving one to wonder what would have happened if she had accepted his invitation. After the meeting, Treppel appeared visibly shaken and deeply impacted by the news from her. This marked a critical moment in the investigation. On April 4, 1990, the agent received an unexpected phone call. The FBI had found thallium in one of the vials taken from Treppel's garage. The vial contained thallium nitrate, the same chemical used to poison Peggy Carr and to try to kill her entire family. This discovery provided crucial evidence to bolster the case against Treppel. On April 5th, George Treppel was arrested at his new home in Seguin. Seeing him led into the county jail in an orange jumpsuit marked the conclusion of a lengthy and dangerous investigation. Even when the agent revealed her true identity, Treppel remained calm. The special agent from the county sheriff's office presented him with a warrant for handwriting samples, to which Treppel simply smiled and said, "Oh, okay." She had narrowly escaped becoming Treppel's next victim. In January 1991, George Treppel's trial began with substantial evidence against him. Police found a journal in Treppel's home called General Poisoning Guides, which identified thallium as a common poison used by criminals. The journal included references to harming neighbors, and 55 fingerprints found in it matched Treppel's. The prosecution also presented the tools used to tamper with the Coke bottles, including a set of tiny screwdrivers. One screwdriver was missing and fit perfectly with the marks on the bottle caps, which was incriminating evidence that shocked the jury. Throughout the trial, Treppel maintained a calm and emotionless demeanor, even smiling at times. His lack of remorse and his premeditated actions revealed a disturbing level of malice. He rationalized his cruel actions by claiming he was more intelligent than others and believed that those he deemed less intelligent did not have the right to live. The trial lasted for 2 months, but the jury took only 4 hours to reach a decision. On March 6, 1991, nearly 2 years after Peggy Carr's death, George Treppel was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death. According to the Florida Department of Corrections, inmates on death row wait an average of 12.7 years for execution. Treppel passed that milestone nearly 8 years ago. With this verdict, justice was served for Peggy Carr. The special agent's unwavering dedication and bravery played a crucial role in bringing this criminal to justice. She put her life at risk to ensure that Treppel was held accountable for his horrific actions. Reflecting on her commitment, one can't help but admire her courage. She went above and beyond to ensure that Peggy's killer faced justice, earning the respect and gratitude of many. The other members of Peggy Carr's family, who also experienced poisoning, fully recovered. However, the loss of Peggy deeply affected her son Dwayne. Losing his mother at just 16 years old was a traumatic event that left him with lasting emotional pain. In the years after her passing, Dwayne struggled with his grief, frequently expressing it through anger and emotional outbursts. Eventually, he discovered comfort in writing letters to his mother, where he shared his feelings. He promised to work on improving his life. Dwayne fulfilled his promise. Today, he is married and is the supportive father his family needs. Each day, he works hard to make his mother proud and honor her memory. Dwayne exemplifies the strength of the human spirit, proving that even after facing great tragedy, it is possible to live a meaningful life. Agostina Jalabert was born on March 23, 1991, in Carmen de Patagones, Buenos Aires, Argentina. She belonged to a well-known family and was the eldest of 3 daughters of Colina and Edgardo Jalabert, who served as the Secretary of Health in their city. Her uncle, German Jalabert,
a former provincial minister of tourism, and was a pre-candidate for deputy in the Rio Negro region. Consequently, the Jalabert family was widely recognized in their province and other regions of Argentina. Those who knew Agostina since her childhood consistently praised her outstanding qualities. She was described as a sensitive, sincere, and loving child who had a passion for dogs. She excelled in design, crafts, and decoration. She had a keen sense of taste and excelled in many things. Agustina also had a strong interest in fashion. She even designed the graduation sweaters for her high school class. She loved dressing up, and during her teenage years, her friends often gathered in the garage of her house for pre-dance parties. She would try to introduce her different groups of friends to each other, always striving to connect people. Those close to her described her as sociable and an excellent hostess. Agustina enjoyed baking and cooking, and she was skilled at it. With a curious nature, when something piqued her interest, she pursued it. After completing her secondary education, she initially enrolled in architecture but later abandoned it. During that time, she focused her energy on fashion design and studied it for a while, but she ultimately changed her direction. Nevertheless, she was a successful young woman who used her knowledge to chase her dreams. She even started her own clothing brand, worked as a model, and was building her career. At some point in her adult life, Agustina's path crossed with Juan Reverter, with whom she began a relationship that seemed to be going well. Little is known about Juan's life, and even the names of his parents have not been disclosed. The only accessible information about Juan is his LinkedIn profile, which promotes him as a software engineer and a graduate of the National Technological University in Argentina. Interestingly, a search at the university did not reveal him as a graduate. Instead, a resolution from the university's Superior Council in 2017 stated that he had not passed 2 subjects during the periods of 2008 and 2009, which led to him losing his status as a regular student in the field of information systems engineering. Agustina and Juan's relationship began during the global issue and was characterized by ups and downs. According to some of her family members, he exhibited psychological violence towards her and was controlling. However, the situation escalated in the summer of 2021, marked by more serious conflicts and violence perpetrated by Juan against Agustina. Her father shared that she was deeply affected by the relationship, but with the support of her family, she was able to rebuild her life and had no contact with him for a whole year. In September 2022, Agustina made the decision to move to Mexico, specifically to the beautiful beach town of Playa del Carmen in the Riviera Maya, to advance her modeling career. She rented an apartment and left her comfort zone in Argentina, creating some distance from Juan. In Mexico, Agustina worked as a hostess and engaged in modeling opportunities. Her dream was to travel the world while pursuing her modeling aspirations. She loved Playa del Carmen and felt genuinely happy there, quickly finding work and thriving. She built many friendships and had the support of a childhood friend who lived nearby, so she didn't feel alone. Additionally, she brought her dog, Bruna, along for emotional support. Agustina loved traveling, which was clear from her social media posts. She had visited amazing places like Brazil, New Zealand, China, and several European capitals such as Madrid, Paris, London, and Brussels, sharing her experiences with her 16,000 Instagram followers. She planned to move to Europe in the future. Meanwhile, her 21-year-old sister Candela came to spend the summer in Playa del Carmen to enjoy the beautiful beaches and be near Agustina. They chose to share Agustina's 2-bedroom apartment to stay comfortable. At the end of December, Agustina's ex-boyfriend Juan returned to her life for the holidays. They reconciled, and he began living with both Agustina and her sister, Candela. Candela was never comfortable with the idea of sharing their home with her sister's boyfriend, but things moved quickly, and soon he was staying in Agustina's room. In recent talks with her family, Agustina revealed that they had decided to get back together and that they planned to move to Spain. However, their relationship never seemed to maintain peace for long. On Thursday, February 16th, a serious argument broke out after Agostina discovered that her partner had been unfaithful. The tension in the apartment was high. The following day, February 17th, 2023, Candela left her sister alone with Juan. When Candela returned the next morning at 7 a.m., she found the door to her sister's apartment locked. She asked the building's doorman if there was a way to get inside. They informed her that they had heard screams and a fight coming from the apartment during the night, prompting the police to be called twice due to complaints from neighbors. Candela returned to the apartment and tried to enter using the access code, but it didn't work. The door was locked from the inside, so she knocked. After several attempts, Juan Rivera eventually answered the door and claimed that Agostina was sleeping. While Agostina and Candela were arguing, Agostina's small dog started barking. The dog, Bruna, led her to the bathroom, and there they found Agostina hanging from the towel rack, sitting or half-sitting, 3 feet off the floor with many bruises. They quickly untied her and brought her to the living room to administer CPR, but it was too late. Agostina was already dead. Candela then called the police. Forensic experts arrived to investigate the scene and took the body to the morgue, where an autopsy was conducted. The case was originally ruled to end one's own life and marked as closed. However, the Jalabert family believed that Agostina's death was actually a murder by her boyfriend, and they had valid reasons for this suspicion. In late February, Edgardo sent a letter to the Foreign Ministry. This letter, which reached the Minister of Foreign Affairs, urged Mexican authorities to take action and highlighted the family's feelings of helplessness regarding their daughter's death. Edgardo pointed out that the investigation was poorly conducted. Basic protocols were not followed. The boyfriend was not arrested. His phone was not seized. Toxicology tests were not performed, and no injuries were examined. Additionally, the family struggled to access the case details, despite the Argentine consulate's attempts to obtain records of the proceedings. These efforts were unsuccessful. Edgardo noted that the Foreign Ministry is required to investigate and address violence against women and to ensure the family receives clarity about Agostina's death. In this case, the ministry's involvement is crucial because, under the current investigation conditions in Mexico, Juan is free to act. Since Juan's legal status is not at risk, he is viewed as a person of interest rather than a fugitive. It's important to remember that both Agostina and Juan are Argentine citizens, and the Foreign Ministry must safeguard the rights of both, even if it turns out that Juan committed the crime alleged by Agostina's family. Colina, Agostina's mother, launched a media campaign to seek justice and pressure Mexican authorities. She spoke out about the abusive relationship between her daughter and her partner. In a televised interview, Colina claimed that Agostina was killed by her boyfriend and detailed how her daughter had been tortured, abused, and beaten, including receiving blows to the head before her death. Colina believed that he had faked the incident, making it look like Agostina hanged herself with a towel rack. She noted that Agostina had been dressed and ready to go out when Candela found her. According to Colina, no one who is considering end one's own life would take the time to get dressed. Colina recalled that Juan had a violent past. During a press conference shared on social media, she disclosed that Juan and Agostina had been facing ongoing issues that they had kept hidden. She expressed that she never trusted him and mentioned that 2 years earlier they had to rescue Agostina from the apartment she shared with Juan after he physically assaulted her. Colina emphasized that if they hadn't intervened that day, her daughter might have lost her life. Following that incident, Agostina decided not to report it, and her parents chose to respect her choice, even though they felt it was important to report such events to the authorities. The impact of not taking action at that time was felt 2 years later in Mexico. On Friday, February 17, at 2:30 p.m., Agostina sent a message to her mother expressing feelings of low self-worth and saying she didn't deserve to be with someone who would hurt her. Colina offered her support from a distance and encouraged Agostina to leave the apartment. Colina believed Agostina made a risky decision by going back to the violent man, which ultimately led to a bad outcome. Sadly, Juan Manuel's parents had reached out to the family and promised to help, but communication ceased when Juan failed to attend a scheduled Zoom meeting to explain his side of the story. Colina stated that Juan had been evading contact, but suspected he was still monitoring the situation to stay updated. She thought he would have shared his perspective if he had nothing to hide. Angry and frustrated, she claimed that Juan's parents were responsible for hiding what she saw as a monstrous act. On March 8th, International Women's Day, marches took place in Mexico and Argentina, demanding justice for Agostina. This intensified pressure on the Mexican prosecutor's office, which then announced an investigation into the death of the Argentine model as a potential femicide. The decision was influenced by the autopsy report, which revealed signs of head and facial injuries, multiple cuts on the body, and bruises indicating possible abuse. A forensic expert hired by the Jalabert family reviewed the official report and pointed out various signs of violence, including punch marks on the mouth and a significant head injury. The expert also noted cuts on several parts of the body, internal and external bruises, suggesting recent non-consensual abuse activity. Unfortunately, the only evidence available is this forensic report, because the Mexican authorities cremated Agostina's body shortly after classifying the case as an end one's own life. After the protests on International Women's Day, the Mexican justice system announced that it has reclassified the case. The family's lawyer confirmed that the case has been transferred to a specialized unit that deals with such matters. She accused the main suspect, Juan Ventura, of trying to stage a end one's own life case and pointed out signs of violence at the crime scene. The apartment was locked from the inside, and both the victim and her partner had visible injuries. A leg from a table was found out of place on the floor, and 2 calls were made to the police the night before. The lawyer criticized the judicial investigation, stating that the crime scene was not properly secured, which goes against established protocol. It is crucial that both the scene and the victim's body be preserved until the investigation is complete. She also noted that due to various mistakes, information that could have been accessed from the devices was lost, as the suspect took the cell phones and all related data with him. The investigation into Agostina's death in Mexico is proving to be difficult for her family, who are monitoring the situation from Argentina, over 7,000 kilometers away, facing different legal and cultural challenges. On March 13, 2023, the prosecutor from Quintana Roo stated during a press conference that Agostina, an Argentine model and influencer, had died by end her own life. He mentioned a history of violence in her relationship with her partner, raising the possibility that Juan may have played a role in her decision to take her life, which could now be part of the investigation. When asked by reporters about the cigarette burns found on Agostina's body, the prosecutor claimed those injuries were inflicted before her death. He indicated that there had been a violent incident between her and her partner the night prior, and there is substantial evidence to support this. The prosecutor mentioned that Juan had been questioned by the investigative police, but there was not enough evidence at that time for an arrest or any legal action against him. Nevertheless, this did not rule out the possibility of him being pursued later if connections to Agostina's death were uncovered. Edgardo, Agostina's father, argued for a change in how the case was classified, stating that their lawyer had found several pieces of evidence that warranted classifying it as femicide. German, the victim's uncle, noted that the Attorney General was pushing the end her own life theory because recognizing the evidence suggesting femicide would mean admitting to their shortcomings. He felt that the prosecution had acted carelessly and too quickly in the investigation's early phases, resulting in important evidence being lost. A journalist mentioned that the prosecutor's office would need to interview the boyfriend as part of the investigation, especially if the case leads to an end her own life. This means he will be required to provide statements to help clarify the situation. Additionally, the journalist noted that the crime was discovered over the weekend, a time when interns and junior investigators usually manage the inquiries in Mexico. This may have contributed to the mishandling of the case. He believes that their errors were not intentional but stemmed from inexperience, which impacted the way the investigation was conducted. A few days, news emerged in Argentina about a call received by Agostina's father, Edgardo. A prosecutor from Quintana Roo reached out to him at the request of the state prosecutor's office. They wanted to discuss the situation with the family. The caller expressed that the system wished to apologize for what had occurred. They assured that if Agostina's boyfriend was found responsible, they would pursue legal action, emphasizing that there was no intention to conceal anything by the prosecutor's office. They also stated that if any public official from the prosecutor's office was found accountable, appropriate actions would be taken. Additionally, the caller mentioned that they would arrange a meeting with the general prosecutor and a team of experts to show Edgardo the evidence they had. They clarified that the general prosecutor had directed other state agencies in Mexico to re-evaluate the autopsy as well. The latest update was provided at the end of March, just a few days before the one-month anniversary of Agostina's death. The case has been moved to the Women's Crimes Division, which means Agostina's case is now being treated as one involving femicide and gender violence. The lawyer is collaborating with the prosecutor assigned to the case and is focusing on gathering evidence to support the femicide angle, as well as examining Juan's potential involvement. She expressed regret for not being able to share more information, but indicated that all evidence related to the murder is currently sealed. The lawyer explained that Juan's arrest timeline will depend on the investigation's findings. It is the prosecutor's responsibility to decide whether there is enough evidence or if additional evidence is required. Despite this, the lawyer expressed confidence in her ability to prove their case. The Mexican justice system has not issued an arrest warrant for him, and no legal actions have been initiated in Argentina since the alleged crime took place in another country. While he is not in custody, he has kept a low profile and has not confronted the family of the girlfriend he reportedly loved and lived with until her death. This case is still being developed, and since it is at an early stage, many processes are being carried out privately and out of the public eye. The prosecutor's office, which is investigating the suspected femicide, has issued a document to find Juan Rivera. This order, issued on June 7, 2023, by the Specialized Prosecutor's Office, focused on femicide cases, aims to search for and locate Juan and ask him to come in for questioning without taking away his freedom. The goal is to conduct a more thorough interview to gather additional information and meet the requirements set by the authorities. It was a quiet December night. The children were asleep, and the house was peaceful. However, something terrible was happening behind a closed door. By the next day, Lindsay Kwai had disappeared. There were no phone calls, no notes, just silence and a strange account from the man who lived with her. Initially, no one knew what to make of it, but as time went on, the truth began to emerge. What really occurred that night in Southport? Lindsay Wilson was born in the seaside town of Southport, near Liverpool. As one of 6 children in a loving and supportive family, Lindsay flourished in the caring environment provided by her parents. She had a strong bond with her siblings, especially her brother, Peter Wilson, who was just a year older. They shared laughter, secrets, and close friendships. Lindsay had a magnetic personality that attracted others, radiating energy, compassion, and joy. Her life changed dramatically in 1995. Lindsay had first become involved with Mitchell Kwai when she was 17 and pregnant by another man. Her brother introduced them. He worked with Mitchell at a local casino. What started as a promising relationship quickly escalated into a passionate romance. Within a week, they were engaged, and just weeks later, they were married. However, the celebration was muted. Mitchell's family was largely absent from the wedding, with only his brother, Elliot Kwai, present. On that same day, Lindsay's father witnessed their first argument, a troubling sign of the difficulties that lay ahead, although no one could have anticipated just how severe their challenges would become. Mitchell grew up in Essex, but relocated to Southport as a teenager after the tragic loss of his mother. with a father frequently absent for work and a younger brother to look after. Mitchell had to mature quickly and face life on his own. This hardship transformed into a more troubling side of his character. In the early stages of his marriage, Mitchell's initial charm disappeared, revealing a harsh and unyielding personality. He became possessive and unpredictable, insisting that everything go his way. Lindsay, who had hoped for a stable life, now felt completely trapped. 6 weeks after the wedding, Lindsay's daughter, Robin, was born. Mitchell began to disappear for days at a time, leaving Lindsay and Robin while he pursued affairs and wild nights. When he returned, he brought roses and offered apologies. This created a cycle of abuse that only grew tighter. Desperate to hold on to the man she once loved, Lindsay repeatedly forgave him. However, each forgiveness made her feel more diminished. Mitchell's control over her became more deceptive. He started to distance her from everyone important in her life: friends, siblings, and even her father, who had always been her protector. Gradually, he made himself the sole influence in her life. Lindsay found herself increasingly isolated, with every escape route blocked by the man who claimed to love her. 18 months after they married, Lindsay sought to escape her situation and turned to a local support center for single mothers, where she found a place to live. For a short time, she felt some relief. However, Mitchell tracked her down, filled with apologies, promises, and tears, which led them back into the same toxic cycle. Lindsay returned home, and soon after, she became pregnant again, hoping this new start might bring change. She approached her pregnancy with quiet determination. She might have believed that the baby could transform Mitchell. Victims of abuse often suffer from misplaced guilt, feeling as though they triggered the pain they endure. Unfortunately, nothing improved. Lindsay's mum reveals she stopped visiting her daughter because she didn't want to see Mitchell, and that the last time she saw her was on December 13th. On Christmas Eve, Mitchell visited Mrs. Wilson to collect the children's presents and told her that Lindsay was getting ready to go out. While the family felt uncomfortable, they weren't overly worried, as her absence had started to feel normal. However, as the holidays went by, without any news from Lindsay, their concern grew stronger. It was 6 weeks before a social worker reported her missing. Due to Lindsay's history of domestic abuse, the police responded quickly. Mitchell claimed that Lindsay had left just before Christmas, when she packed her bags and walked away, never to return. He insisted that she was an adult capable of making her own choices. However, both Lindsay's family and investigators found his account suspicious and doubted his statements. By April the following year, police discovered Mitchell had been withdrawing benefits in Lindsay's name. They arrested him on suspicion of murder, solicitation to cause grievous bodily harm, and fraud. Although he downplayed the seriousness of his actions, his comments unsettled those who heard them. He stated he wouldn't even help her if she were in danger after what she did to him and the kids. As time went on, suspicions about Mitchell intensified. He appeared completely untroubled and showed no signs of sadness. He gave interviews, portraying himself as a victim who had been deserted. However, investigators weren't fooled by his performance. They suspected that Lindsay never left the house alive, but they lacked evidence: no body, no confession, and no clear proof. The central question was, where was Lindsay Kwai? While Lindsay's family desperately searched for her, Mitchell seemed to enjoy being in the spotlight. With cameras rolling and reporters watching, he presented himself not as a grieving partner, but as someone who thrived on the attention. Mitchell even sent the detective a Christmas card with a bottle of hair dye and a note telling him to get rid of the gray hair to feel more confident. He reported to the authorities that he had seen Lindsay around town, specifically near shops, and in a black Mercedes with another man. He insisted she was nearby and that he could recognize her, yet no one else ever spotted her. He depicted himself as a victim of suspicion rather than tragedy. His statements were inconsistent and lacked any evidence to support them. Despite thorough forensic investigations, no conclusive evidence was found in the home he had shared with Lindsay. Investigators did discover significant purchases of cleaning supplies, which raised concerns, but without a body or evidence of wrongdoing. The case has reached a standstill. While Mitchell misled the media and law enforcement, Lindsay's family faced overwhelming silence. Her father, Peter, spearheaded a persistent search for her. He distributed flyers throughout neighborhoods to seek help and to confront Mitchell with Lindsay's image daily. He scoured canals, ditches, and muddy woods, holding on to hope but increasingly feeling despair. Peter suspected Mitchell was involved, but without a body, a confession, or any closure, he was left with grief and unanswered questions. Each week, Peter confronted a terrifying reality as he picked up his grandchildren from the man he believed killed his daughter. He maintained a calm voice and neutral expression, but beneath his composed facade was an anger he struggled to contain for Lindsay, for her children, and for the elusive truth. A pivotal moment occurred on June 9th, several months after Lindsay went missing, when police officially declared her dead. On the same day, they arrested Mitchell for her murder. During police questioning, he declined to provide any information, repeating the phrase "no comment." The evidence against him was weak, just bits of circumstantial evidence and a pattern of troubling behavior. Then, unexpectedly, after only one night in custody, Mitchell confessed. He revealed that he had killed Lindsay on December 16, 1998. That evening, they argued in their bedroom, just steps away from where their two young children were sleeping. Lindsay allegedly said she wanted a divorce. Mitchell grabbed her by the neck and held her to the floor for 20 minutes. He then placed her body in the bedroom and sealed the door with a towel to prevent her two children from smelling the corpse. In the following 48 hours, Mitchell committed a horrifying act. In the attic of their family home, he dismembered Lindsay's body. He didn't do this alone. His brother Elliot, who had previously worked in a butcher shop, assisted him. Police believe Elliot's experience helped minimize evidence and avoid mistakes. Elliot Quay was not known for being independent. Investigators described him as having limited cognitive abilities and likely needing special care. His life centered around his older brother, Mitchell, who had a significant influence on him. Unfortunately, this influence led Elliot into a dark situation. After confessing to a murder, Mitchell guided investigators to where he had hidden the remains of Lindsay. The discoveries were disturbing. Miss Quay's dismembered body was found in a shallow grave near a roller coaster at Pleasureland in the seaside resort of Southport, Merseyside. Her arms and legs were later found wrapped in plastic bags in separate places on a railway embankment. A bin bag containing her head and hands, believed to have been buried in 200,000 tons of rubbish at a Lancashire landfill site, has never been recovered. One disturbing detail emerged during the investigation. Mitchell likely disposed of Lindsay's remains while out walking with his children. This cold and calculated approach, using casual outings as a disguise, was both unsettling and clever, as he knew how to avoid suspicion. In January 2001, the case went to trial at Liverpool Crown Court. However, before the trial began, Mitchell attempted to change his confession. He claimed he hadn't killed Lindsay, but had only dismembered and discarded her body. His story was so far-fetched that even his own legal team urged him to drop it. Ultimately, Mitchell pleaded guilty to all charges. The court found him guilty not only of murder, but also of obstructing justice and misleading law enforcement. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 17 years. Meanwhile, Elliot received a 7-year sentence, which many members of Lindsay's family felt was too lenient. The outcome brought some relief, but it did not bring peace. Sadly, just 3 months after the sentencing, the family faced another heartbreaking tragedy. Lindsay's brother, Peter Wilson Jr., was found dead in the attic of their childhood home. He had taken his own life, leaving no note, but those who knew him understood the reason. Peter had never forgiven himself for introducing Lindsay to Mitchell. In the months following her death, he fell into a deep depression, isolating himself and overwhelmed by guilt. He often expressed that his life felt meaningless without his sister. Tragically, it was his father, who had already been burdened by Lindsay's loss, who discovered Peter's body. At that time, Peter's fiancée was pregnant, meaning another child would grow up without knowing their father, yet another victim of the devastation caused by Mitchell's actions. In 2017, Mitchell became eligible for parole. Lindsay's daughter, Robin, who was only 22 at the time, started a campaign to stop his release. She created a petition on Facebook that gathered thousands of signatures and became a powerful call for justice. The public's anger contributed to the rejection of Mitchell's parole requests. By 2022, he had been denied parole 3 times. His ongoing manipulative behavior in prison, such as aggressive outbursts and involvement in illegal substances smuggling, reinforced the arguments against his release. Lindsay's children, Robin and Jack, were brought up by Wilson family in a loving and stable environment, which was the kind of upbringing their mother always wished for them. Their story today serves as a powerful reminder that there are often people behind closed doors who are quietly asking for help. Lindsay Kwai's 1998 murder by Mitchell Kwai tore through her family and Southport's quiet streets. Her cheerful spirit, the light to her children, Robin and Jack, was lost in a barbaric act. The pain deepened when her brother, Peter Wilson Jr., took his own life. Despite this, the Wilson family found strength. Robin's courageous fight kept Mitchell in prison, honoring her mother's love. Southport's community rallied, sharing flyers and holding vigils to keep Lindsay's name alive and warn against domestic abuse. Meanwhile, her unrecovered remains leave an ache, but Robin and Jack thrive in the caring home Lindsay always wanted. Her story begs us to notice those trapped in silence, to offer help, and to hold loved ones close before it's too late.